Si Chen was not just an ordinary student anymore. He was someone who had lived through the end of the world once before, carrying memories no normal person should ever have. He had returned from a ruined future, a timeline soaked in despair, where humanity had already lost almost everything. In that future, the entire world had fallen under the rule of demons, and every corner of civilization had been crushed beneath their power. By the very end, Si Chen had become the last survivor left standing, completely alone in a world that had already collapsed. For years, he kept fighting through endless bloodshed and hopeless battles, until he finally managed to corner and defeat the Demon King himself. But the price of that victory was his own life, because Si Chen destroyed himself together with the Demon King in one final desperate explosion. Then, just as everything should have ended, a blinding white light swallowed his vision completely. When Si Chen opened his eyes again, he found himself lying in the past, inside the familiar dorm room from his old university days. At first, his mind was a complete mess. He stared around in confusion, wondering if this place was some kind of afterlife waiting for him after death. But when he turned toward the window and looked outside, he saw people standing there like everything was perfectly normal, their figures moving through the sunlight as if the nightmare had never happened. That ordinary sight made Si Chen's thoughts slowly begin to settle, and piece by piece he started to understand what had really happened. After a long, stunned moment, the truth finally struck him. The wish he had made at the very end had actually come true. Si Chen had returned 10 full years into the past, back to the time when he was still just a university student. But before he could fully process this impossible second chance, a strange holographic screen suddenly appeared in front of him. The glowing interface announced that Chen had completely integrated the power of gluttony, its words hanging in the air like something from another world. Si Chen stood there staring through the window. He realized that only 3 years remained before the first demon Lord Wrath would descend upon the world. That name alone was enough to make his expression turn heavy, because he remembered better than anyone that this demon lord caused everything that came after. Wrath was the monster who first tore open the gates of hell, and once those gates appeared, the other demon lords entered the human world one after another, dragging mankind into disaster. So Si Chen made up his mind right there. Before Wrath could ever open those gates, he had to find the place where that demon lord would appear and eliminate him first. Pulling himself out of those dark memories, Chen turned his attention to the floating interface beside him, where his personal stats were displayed in clear, glowing text. He stared at it with a frown, wondering whether this was some kind of game-like menu or mysterious system, because nothing like this had existed for him in his previous life. Back then, the only thing he had been able to rely on was his awakened ability, a rare power that only one person out of 10,000 could ever possess. The National Awakener University had been created to gather and train people with that kind of potential. Unfortunately, during Chen's first life, he completely failed to awaken while studying there, and because of that, he slowly became used to being pushed around and bullied. That was exactly why he had just woken up inside the infirmary. All of a sudden, the system opened another panel in front of him, revealing a lightning-type assassin card. The moment Chen saw it, he recognized it as the exact class he had used in his previous life. His eyes widened in shock, and for a second, he wondered if he had somehow awakened far earlier than before in this new timeline. Chen immediately wanted to test the class and see what had changed. But before he could switch anything, his roommate and friend Ma Long suddenly appeared. Ma Long was an E-rank flower chanter, a class that already placed him near the very bottom among awakeners. The poor guy still had bandages stuck to his cheek, and despite looking hurt himself, he had come all the way over just to check whether Chen was okay. Fortunately, Ma Long showed no reaction to the glowing panels hovering nearby, which made Chen realize that this strange system was visible only to him. Ma Long leaned in and checked Chen carefully, only to notice that every injury on Chen's body had already vanished. He could not understand how someone who had not awakened could recover even faster than him, an awakened student. Looking at Ma Long's familiar face, Chen immediately remembered what had happened to this friend in his previous life. Back then, Ma Long had successfully awakened during university, but he had still remained one of the weakest awakeners, and after Wrath descended, he was brutally killed on only the 3rd day. Now seeing his old roommate alive in front of him again, Chen could not help but smile quietly, a faint warmth rising behind his calm expression. Ma Long then reminded him that their rank test was scheduled for tomorrow, so they needed to start preparing as soon as possible. He clearly felt sorry for Chen, believing his friend still had not awakened, but he still reminded him that this test was extremely important if Chen wanted any chance of graduating. Later, as the two of them walked through the lively streets, Chen casually said it had been a long time since he had seen so many people gathered around. The comment sounded so strange that it immediately scared Ma Long half to death. Inside, Chen was thinking about something much darker. If he did nothing in this life, every person walking around these streets would eventually fall into the same miserable future all over again. Because of that, Chen silently resolved that he had to train with everything he had and raise his level as quickly as possible. There was just one serious problem. At this point in the timeline, an awakener could only gain experience and level up by killing monsters inside demon lairs. And those lairs were already tightly controlled by powerful guilds, which meant weak students and outsiders like Chen had almost no real opportunity to enter them and grow stronger. Chen opened his status window again and carefully studied each of his stats, trying to judge how he compared not only with other awakeners, but also with the monsters he would eventually have to face. In this world, the government officially divided awakeners into ranks, beginning at E rank and rising step by step all the way up to S class. Chen knew very well that most students at the university were still trapped at E rank, while only a small handful had barely managed to climb into D rank. He glanced over at Ma Long beside him and quietly laughed to himself, feeling at least a little confident that his current rank should already be higher than his friends. Right at that moment, a ball suddenly came flying toward them and slammed straight into the poor nerd, knocking his glasses off his face and smashing them to pieces. When they looked over, it turned out they had run into Gong Cheng and his lackeys again, the same bullies who had beaten them up only yesterday. Gong Cheng stood there with a smug grin on his face and mocked them, asking why they had not brought crates of drinks when they already knew his group would be playing there. Ma Long immediately panicked and started apologizing, even getting ready to spend his own money to buy the drinks. But before he could give in, Chen stepped forward and stopped him, calmly saying that the one who should be apologizing was actually Gong Cheng. The moment Chen saw that bully standing in front of him again, the sight dragged him straight back into memories he had never forgotten. In his first life, these same people had once shoved him down and tried to drown him inside a sink like it was nothing. And instead of showing even the slightest guilt afterward, they casually claimed they were only trying to force him to awaken. That day, they did not stop, because they felt mercy. They only stopped after Chen's body finally went limp, and he completely passed out. Ma Long had rushed over in a panic to check on him, but the instant Gong Cheng heard Chen's voice again, he turned back around, ready to hurt him even worse. Snapping back to the present, Chen's eyes turned cold, and he silently decided that this time, these bullies were going to learn a real lesson. After hearing Chen stand up to him, Gong Cheng and his lackeys immediately stepped forward, their faces darkening as if they were ready to shut him up by force. Chen looked Gong Cheng straight in the eyes, fully aware that this guy only dared to bully the weak because his older brother was the student council president. As Gong Cheng closed the distance with an arrogant stride, more and more students began gathering around, sensing that another fight was about to break out. The students watching already started feeling sorry for Chen, assuming he was about to get beaten down again just like before. When Gong Cheng finally reached him, he leaned in with a threatening look and asked Chen to repeat what he had just said. Chen did not lower his gaze or step back. Instead, he calmly repeated that from now on, Gong Cheng and his group needed to stop bothering him. That answer instantly set Gong Cheng off. His face twisted with anger, and he threw a punch straight toward Chen without holding back. But this time, Chen only lifted his fist and met the attack head-on, blocking it with frightening ease before forcing Gong Cheng backward. For a second, the entire crowd went silent, everyone staring at the scene in complete disbelief. As far as they all knew, Chen had not even awakened yet, and somehow he had just stopped a powerful strike, as if it were nothing. The shock on everyone's faces only made Gong Cheng more furious, and he immediately rushed forward again, desperate to crush Chen properly this time. Chen stayed perfectly calm as he prepared himself, then silently switched his class into Electric Assassin. Standing nearby, Ma Long could only stare with wide eyes, completely frozen by what he was seeing. At the same time, Gong Cheng activated his indestructible demon armor, his body surging with power as he charged in with a heavy strike. But before Gong Cheng could even get close enough to land it, Chen flashed forward and smashed him away with a punch wrapped in crackling lightning. The students around them could barely believe what had just happened right in front of their eyes. The so-called weakling everyone used to look down on had just sent the school bully flying with only one punch. Even after taking that kind of blow, Gong Cheng still refused to accept defeat. Gritting his teeth, he shouted at his lackeys to jump in and take revenge for him. But after seeing Chen blast him away so easily, those lackeys were already trembling, their courage disappearing faster than they could hide it. Gong Cheng forced himself back onto his feet, anger burning through his humiliation, and charged at Chen yet again. But the result did not change at all. Chen struck him down once more, sending him crashing away without giving him the slightest chance to fight back. After watching their boss get crushed again and again, the lackeys finally understood the gap between them and Chen, and they quickly turned around and ran. Ma Long stood there speechless, his jaw practically hanging open as he struggled to accept that the roommate who had been beaten so easily yesterday had suddenly become this terrifyingly strong. Chen, meanwhile, understood something important from the fight. Just like in his previous life, he could enter his assassin state whenever he wanted. And even though he was still only level 1 right now, his current stats were already high enough to deal with low-level awakeners. That meant his present strength had at least reached the level of a D-class awakener. Still, there was one detail Chen could not ignore, and he needed to confirm it for himself. Even after defeating Gong Cheng, The system had not given him any sign of leveling up. Curious about that strange result, Chen stepped forward as if he intended to finish the bully completely, making the surrounding students panic as they watched. But just as Chen was about to take things further, Ling Yu, the vice president of the student council, suddenly stepped in and told him to stop. She reminded Chen that even though Gong Cheng was the one at fault, the beating had already gone far enough. Ling Yu then assured him that after what happened today, Gong Cheng would not dare to come looking for trouble again. Hearing that, Chen finally pulled himself back and chose to let Gong Cheng go. As he stepped away, Chen could not help wondering why the student council was so eager to protect someone like Gong Cheng. He had only been putting on an act and had never truly planned to kill him, but he still believed bullies like this needed to be punished properly. Because if people like Gong Cheng were allowed to walk away too easily, they would simply keep picking on anyone weaker than them over and over again. With the matter settled for now, Chen turned and left together with Ma Long. From a distance, Gong Cheng's lackeys hid themselves and whispered nervously, agreeing that they should never provoke Chen again. That night, Ma Long tried excitedly to tell their other roommates that Chen had awakened as an unbelievably powerful lightning assassin, but none of them believed him. No matter how seriously Ma Long explained that their once weak friend had beaten Gong Cheng until he could barely fight back, Xiang Zuo, an E-ranked nucleus mage, treated the whole thing like a joke. Xiang Zuo questioned why Chen was still running around doing ordinary training if he had really become such an incredible awakener, arguing that a true awakener would not need basic physical exercises anymore. Hearing Ma Long insist on it so earnestly, their gamer roommate Xiang Yu casually commented that Ma Long must have taken a pretty serious blow to the head. Xiang Zuo kept going, bluntly saying that the four of them were placed in the same dorm because they were the weakest students at the very bottom, and nothing they did would change that fact. He even declared that among the four of them, he was the strongest one, while Ma Long and Xiang Yu were only support chanters. Then Xiang Zuo proudly flexed a little, convincing himself that there was absolutely no way Chen had truly become a lightning assassin. With his confidence swelling higher than ever, Xiang Zuo started imagining that maybe during tomorrow's final graduation test, he might even break through and raise his rank. Meanwhile, at an E-ranked demon lair, Student Council President Gong Ting finished his own training and calmly walked out with Ling Yu at his side. The moment he stepped outside, he noticed his younger brother still lingering nearby. So he turned toward Gong Cheng and asked what he was doing there. Gong Cheng immediately started complaining, saying that as long as the guy who beat him was still walking around freely, he could not even sleep in peace. He kept pressing his brother, begging Gong Ting to step in and take revenge for him. Gong Ting did not look shaken at all. He simply answered in a calm voice, assuring his brother that he would clean up the trouble Gong Cheng had caused. Later, while they sat at the dining table, Ling Yu looked across at Gong Ting and asked how he planned to handle this situation. Gong Ting did not answer directly. Instead, he asked her whether the boy Gong Cheng talked about was truly as strong as his brother claimed. Ling Yu reminded him that the entire school had fewer than 10 D-ranked students, and every single one of those rare students had already been recruited into Gong Ting's club. She then added that ordinary students did not even have access to demon lairs the way Gong Ting did, so there should be no normal student capable of standing against him. Outside, while rain poured down heavily, Chen kept running through the storm like a madman, his clothes soaked through and his body drenched from head to toe. He had set himself a brutal goal, run a full 20 kilometers while carrying a bag packed with 100 kilos, almost twice his own body weight. Chen understood better than anyone that basic training was essential for pushing an awakener's limits, because without a strong enough body, high-level powers would eventually become impossible to control. As his feet kept pounding against the rain-soaked ground, memories of his sister, his only remaining family, surfaced in his mind, especially the day she was killed when Demon King Wrath descended into the human world. Back then, that demon lord had slaughtered countless humans in an instant, and Chen had been forced to watch his sister die right before his eyes. From that moment on, defeating that demon king became Chen's most important goal, because Wrath's arrival was the beginning of every disaster that followed. Chen knew that even though 3 years remained before Wrath's descent, the demon lord was already growing stronger somewhere. If Chen wanted even the slightest chance of winning, he had to grow faster than him. Right then, while Chen was still pushing himself through the rain, his sister Sai Yun suddenly called him. The instant he heard her voice again after so many years, Chen froze into silence, unable to speak for a moment. Cici Yun explained that she had not been able to call earlier because she was busy with a competition, and she happily added that if she managed to win a prize, their rent problem might finally be solved. As she continued talking on the other end of the call, Chen simply listened quietly, a soft smile slowly appearing on his face. Deep in his heart, he made a firm promise that this time, he would protect her no matter what, and give her the life she truly deserved. After the call ended, Chen returned to his training without hesitation and forced himself to complete 3 more laps around the university. Once he finally finished, he went straight to take a shower, feeling his younger body slowly adapting again and sensing the powerful growth potential hidden inside it. Afterward, Chen sat down alone and began thinking seriously about the demon lairs, those dangerous places that only people with money and influence could freely enter. He knew he had to find some way to defeat monsters, because without monster kills, there was no way for him to keep growing stronger. While this problem circled through his mind, Chen eventually drifted into sleep, only to feel himself being pulled into the gluttony system. When he opened his eyes again, he found himself standing in a strange, unfamiliar space, and immediately wondered whether he had fallen into some bizarre... Back in the real world, Ma Long searched around for Chen, confused about where his roommate had suddenly disappeared to. Inside that mysterious space, Chen looked ahead and saw a massive tower rising before him, its huge silhouette standing like a dark wall in the distance. But before he could properly examine the tower, a group of E-rank cloud warriors known as Deathhounds suddenly appeared, as if they had come to welcome him. Chen immediately became cautious, worrying that he had somehow entered a demon lair, and he quickly switched into his combat class. Since the monsters had already appeared out of nowhere, Chen decided there was no point overthinking it yet. He would take them down first and figure out the truth afterward. The Deathhounds turned out to be weak opponents, all noise and no real threat, so Chen cut them down with ease and collected the items they dropped. Before long, Chen reached level 2 and a small smile crossed his face as he wondered if he had somehow gotten lucky and stumbled into a demon lair by chance. Soon after that, a boss monster appeared in front of him, but even this stronger enemy could not put up much of a fight. Chen sliced straight through the boss, ending the battle quickly and allowing his level to rise again. Experience points from that boss were far greater than what he had received from the ordinary monsters earlier. Then, the boss monster's body was suddenly marked as something that could be devoured, making Chen narrow his eyes in confusion. He remembered the gluttony skill he had seen on his system panel earlier, so he reached out his hand to test what it could actually do. The devouring process finished in an instant, and the monster's body was absorbed into a card right before his eyes. Chen was stunned when he realized what had just happened. Defeated monsters could be transformed into new classes that he himself could use. Very quickly, he understood that this was the exact same terrifying ability once used by the demon lord Lan Yu. The thought that he now possessed a power identical to a demon lord's made Chen's heart shake with unease. In this world, almost everyone was born with only one class, and even the rare geniuses who had two were already considered extraordinary. But Chen was different now, because this ability meant he could hold as many classes as he wanted. He could not help wondering how he had obtained such an absurd power, and at the same time he questioned what that dark tower standing before him truly was. While those thoughts raced through his mind, an overwhelming presence suddenly pressed down on him, and a new demon appeared, gripping two S-rank blades. Just from the pressure around it, Chen could tell this demon was clearly S-rank, which meant he had almost no real chance of winning in a direct fight. Even knowing he was badly outmatched, Chen still summoned a lightning sword into his hand, ready to risk everything and fight for his life. But then something strange happened. The demon standing before him looked straight at Chen and somehow called him by name. The demon clashed with Chen again and again, trading strikes with him in the middle of that strange space. But it was painfully obvious that the monster was not fighting seriously at all. Every time its blades came down, it deliberately avoided Chen's vital points, choosing instead to knock him to the ground over and over, as if it were testing him. Only after driving Chen's body close to its limit did the demon finally slow down and open its mouth to speak. It told Chen that if he wanted to live, he could remain here and guard the tower together with it. Chen rejected the offer without hesitation, and the demon immediately punished him by slashing brutally across his arm. The demon then warned that it could end his life at any moment, explaining that the only reason Chen had survived this long was because he was the first person capable of reaching this place. It told him to think carefully one more time, but even with blood running down his arm, Chen's eyes still refused to lose their light. Ignoring the danger pressing down on him, Chen rejected the demon again, making it clear that he had no intention of becoming its guard. Then he shouted with everything he had and rushed forward once more, determined to strike back no matter how impossible the fight looked. But during the entire battle, Chen had not just been getting beaten down. He had been watching the demon carefully, studying every movement it made. He had noticed that before each swing, there was a tiny delay of exactly 0.4 seconds. That narrow window was enough for him to read the angle of the demon's wrist, predict the path of the blade, and dodge at the perfect moment. He had also caught another weakness. After every attack, the demon paused for 0.2 seconds before it could recover. Chen planned to use that tiny opening to slip past its guard and aim his next strike directly at its heart. Even after pulling off such a dangerous move, Chen knew the truth very clearly. As a D rank, he could not truly defeat an S rank monster, so his real plan was only to paralyze it long enough to escape. He managed to land the move exactly as planned, then immediately turned and sprinted toward the only light he could see, hoping desperately that it was the exit. But just as Chen reached that glow, the light suddenly disappeared right in front of him. The demon calmly told him that the light had only been an illusion, and that in this place there was no real way out. It then explained that this palace was not a demon lair at all, though it still praised Chen for discovering the flaws in its attacks so quickly. The demon finally revealed its true name as Purgatory Rakshasa, then told Chen that he really was the one capable of bringing hope. When Chen looked more closely at Purgatory Rakshasa's body, his expression suddenly changed in shock. He realized that this exact appearance was something he had seen before on Demon King Lan Yu. Chen's mind immediately flashed back to the final battle before he returned to the past, when the enemy standing against him had been far more than an ordinary demon. During that desperate fight, the creature had first transformed into a massive dragon. After that, it kept shifting into other terrifying high-level monsters, each form more dangerous than the last. It unleashed boiling magma, poisonous vines, and lightning so powerful that it even surpassed Chen's own. But among all those monstrous transformations, the one that had left the deepest impression looked exactly like the demon standing before him now. Chen suddenly understood something shocking. Every single transformation he had seen must have been part of Demon King Lan Yu's power. And since that power had now been absorbed into him, the Purgatory Rakshasa in front of him was actually a manifestation of gluttony inside his own body. Purgatory Rakshasa seemed impressed by how quickly Chen pieced it together, calmly saying that he was truly worthy of inheriting the power of this entire dimension. Chen frowned at those words, unable to understand what the demon meant by an entire dimension. At that moment, a golden void key appeared in Purgatory Rakshasa's hand, shining as the only thing that could open the path in and out of the giant tower behind it. Purgatory Rakshasa explained that Demon King Lan Yu had once devoured countless powerful monsters, and its sacred duty had been to guard the tower that imprisoned the strongest among them. Now, Purgatory Rakshasa chose to hand that key over to Chen, wanting him to devour those demons, grow stronger through them, and inherit the mission it had guarded for so long. Still confused, Chen could not help asking why a demon would ever choose to help a human. The creature answered that even in the demon world there were good beings and evil ones, and one vicious monster had slaughtered its entire clan purely for amusement. Since that day, Purgatory Rakshasa had been waiting for a chance to take revenge. Now it believed Chen was the person who could finally fulfill that wish, saying that someone had been right about him being their greatest hope. Chen immediately focused on that detail and asked who that person was. Purgatory Rakshasa did not give him a direct answer, only saying in a mysterious voice that every answer he wanted was waiting inside the tower. Then, with what sounded like its final words, Purgatory Rakshasa offered all of its remaining energy to Chen. In exchange, it told Chen that he had to become the strongest human on the planet, because devouring every wild beast sealed inside the tower would never be easy. Each of those intelligent creatures would be a massive challenge to defeat. And Purgatory Rakshasa gave one final warning. Only someone with an unshakable hunger to grow stronger deserved its power. That hunger, it said, was the drive Chen would need if he truly wanted to kill every demon king in existence. After saying this, Purgatory Rakshasa's body turned into a blazing sphere of energy, burning brightly as it moved toward Chen to be absorbed. The moment Chen absorbed it, his level shot up 8 times in a row, and he also obtained 2 of Purgatory Rakshasa's swords. Without the slightest hesitation, Chen accepted the mission and promised to carry out the fallen warrior's final wish. Along with the massive increase in his stats, Chen also unlocked the power to control gravity and absorb strength from the bodies of dead humans and demons. The next morning, Chen slowly opened his eyes and found himself waking up inside his dorm room as if it were just another ordinary day. A loud voice suddenly rang through the room, making him jump up. His roommates were already getting ready and hurried him to move faster if he did not want to be late for school. When Chen looked down and realized his body was completely unharmed, he could not help wondering whether everything he had just experienced had only been some strange dream. But the newly updated stats leave no room for doubt. What he witnessed wasn't a dream, a hallucination, or some trick of his exhausted mind. Every impossible thing he saw had really happened. After shooting all the way from level 2 to level 10 in a single night, he can't help staring at his own status with growing curiosity. If his level changed that much overnight, then what rank does that make him now? Right as he is caught up in that thought, his roommate starts teasing him from the side, clearly not planning to let the moment pass quietly. The roommate brings up how, just the night before, someone had been shamelessly hyping him up, going on and on about how cool he looked, and how terrifyingly strong he had suddenly become. Across the room, Ma Long quietly peeks over with the most innocent face he can manage, pretending this conversation has absolutely nothing to do with him. Either way, his roommate pushes him to prove it during the ranking test. After all, that test will decide who truly has the strength to keep calling himself the Dorm King. On their way to school, the self-proclaimed Dorm King walks with his chest puffed out, proudly explaining to his friends that every rank is actually split into 3 separate levels. So even if all of them are technically E rank, he makes sure everyone knows he is at least a respectable mid-E rank. In his mind, that already puts him far above the bottom-tier weaklings, and he struts around like the gap between each level is some massive, uncrossable wall. Getting more and more fired up by his own words, the guy confidently declares that he feels unbelievably powerful today, almost certain that he must have climbed another level since the last assessment. Ma Long, already irritated by all the bragging, tells our boy to stop messing around and just go all out today. At the very least, he wants him to secure a D rank, if only to finally make that noisy dorm king close his mouth. Before long, the boys arrive at school, where crowds of students have already gathered for the ranking ceremony, everyone standing around with tense faces and nervous energy in the air. Then the bullies make their entrance, walking through the campus like they own the place, throwing insults at anyone unlucky enough to meet their eyes. Dorm King's proud expression vanishes almost instantly when he spots them, his confidence draining from his face like someone flipped a switch. But strangely enough, the bullies don't keep that fearless attitude for long either. The moment they notice who is in front of them, their own courage disappears. Without the slightest hesitation, they lower their heads and bow respectfully toward Big Brother Chen, acting as if they have just run into someone they absolutely cannot offend. Seeing that reaction, his roommates slowly begin to piece things together. Maybe all the wild things Ma Long had been saying weren't complete nonsense after all. Our boy doesn't even bother giving the bullies much attention. He simply ignores the commotion and continues minding his own business as if none of it matters. But then another student steps directly into his path. It is Jian, a student council officer who carries himself like the school's personal law enforcer, and he gives Chen a warning with an overly polite tone. Jian makes it clear that the student council president personally sent him here to punish the person who dared to lay hands on his precious younger brother. The second Chen's friends hear that, they scatter almost immediately, slipping away and hiding like they want no part of what is about to happen. They are clearly terrified of Jian, the enforcer known for handling the president's dirty work. Chen's roommates can't understand why a dangerous D-rank monster like him would suddenly be aiming his hostility at Chen. Jian steps in close, invading Chen's personal space without holding back. With a smug look, the president's loyal follower boasts that his sense of smell is so sharp, he can judge exactly how powerful someone is just by standing near them. And according to him, what he smells from Chen right now is nothing impressive at all. Just the scent of a weak, miserable loser. Instead of getting angry, our boy looks more amused than offended. Without even pausing, he throws the insult right back at Jian. The moment Jian is called a dog, his expression twists with rage, and he completely loses his temper on the spot. Before the situation can explode into an actual fight, the overgrown pup's master orders him to stand down, making it clear they are not going to create a public scene in front of everyone. After looking into what happened, he discovered that his younger brother had actually been the one who started the conflict in the first place. So in the end, getting beaten up was simply the natural consequence of picking a fight with someone far beyond his ability to handle. Even so, after saying that, the president fixes Chen with a cold glare, sharp enough to feel like daggers cutting through the air. But our hero doesn't shrink back at all. He meets that pressure without the slightest hint of fear, completely untouched by the threat in the president's eyes. Just then, a professor steps forward and announces that the rank assessment ceremony is officially beginning. He instructs every student to come forward when their name is called. Hearing the announcement, the president tells his lapdog that they are leaving in his mind. This was only a one-time incident, and after being warned, Chen surely wouldn't dare cause trouble again. High above the crowd, a man watches the ceremony with interest and asks the vice president why she came to observe the rankings today. With a curious glance, he wonders if some particular rookie has managed to catch her attention. The woman only gives a faint, knowing smile, saying that this year's assessment is going to be rather interesting. Before long, Xiang Zuo's name is called out, drawing the dorm king's attention as his turn finally arrives. The dorm king suddenly looks a little nervous as he steps toward the door, his earlier confidence no longer quite as steady as before. The moment he passes through, the atmosphere on the other side changes completely, as if he has stepped out of the school and into another world. The assessment is carried out one student at a time inside a special demon lair. Deep within that space sits a demon heart connected to wires, and by absorbing an awakener's energy, it measures both their current rank and their future potential. Once the awakener releases their full power, the signal is transmitted back to Earth, and only then are the assessment results revealed for everyone to see. When the Dorm King's result appears, his rank turns out to be exactly the same as it was during the last test, without even the smallest improvement. However, the professor frowns in confusion when the potential score does not appear right away, the delayed result making the room feel strangely tense. Ma Long fixes his eyes on the shifting numbers, watching every flicker of the display as if the next second might change everything. But after all that suspense, Xiang Zuo's maximum potential finally appears, and it is only C rank. He walks out looking completely deflated, finally realizing that the progress he had imagined was nothing more than wishful thinking. His roommates try to cheer him up, telling him not to take it too hard since, in the end, they are all stuck in the same situation. After all, every one of them is still trapped at E rank, and even at their best, their future potential only reaches C rank. A short while later, the president's lapdog walks out with his head held high. His current rank is still lower D, but his potential is enough to reach a rank, and that alone gives him plenty of reason to look proud. Chen's roommates begin to lose hope as they look around, because by now they have already seen close to 10 students reach D rank. Even the professors are visibly shocked by the results. For students who have barely any real combat experience, breaking past E rank is supposed to be extremely rare, yet today far too many have already done it. Filled with excitement, the professors call the next student forward. This time, it is the president himself, the one carrying nearly everyone's expectations on his shoulders. All eyes immediately shift toward Gong Ting, the student who is already powerful enough to be a guild master, as he calmly walks onto the stage. Our boy remains completely composed, standing there without the slightest trace of panic as he quietly waits for his own results to appear. Everyone in the academy already knows Gong Ting's background. 2 years ago, he was only a lower D rank, but the highest result in the school's history has never gone beyond middle D rank. So now the whole crowd is wondering if the president is about to break that record for good. Inside the demon lair, the demon heart reacts to Gong Ting's arrival, and its closed eyes slowly open, as if the creature has sensed a powerful presence stepping into its domain. Even then, the president still can't release every bit of power hidden inside him, leaving some of his true strength restrained beneath the surface. But deep down, he has no intention of graduating quietly. He wants to leave with a result so dazzling that his name will be carved into the Academy's history as the undisputed #1. The moment the professors see his potential grade shine with a brilliant golden glow, their eyes widen, and for a second they can hardly believe what they are looking at. Their doubts disappear almost immediately when Gong Ting's high D rank is confirmed, and the result hits them so hard that even the experienced professors are left stunned. And that isn't even the most shocking part. The instant the crowd sees that he has the first recorded S-rank potential in history, excitement explodes through the entire ceremony. The president's followers instantly lose control of themselves, praising their boss again and again as if they are witnessing the rise of an untouchable genius. Even Chen's roommates can't stop the jealousy from burning in their eyes, because right in front of them, it feels like a legend is being born on the spot. The professors exchange serious looks and quickly come to the same conclusion. News this important has to be reported to the Academy administration right away. A precious S-rank candidate like this must be protected and nurtured with extreme care, and they absolutely cannot allow someone with that kind of potential to leave the country. On top of everything else, Gong Ting is also the youngest student in the academy to become involved with a guild, which means their school's name is practically guaranteed to dominate every headline. Watching everything unfold from above, Principal Yuan Long finally understands that Vice President Ling Yu must have already known about Gong Ting's incredible potential. That explains why she personally came to observe the ceremony today, instead of simply waiting for the official report like everyone else. But then she makes the situation even more intriguing by revealing that Gong Ting is not the only student she came here to watch. Aside from the flashy student council president, there is another student who has caught her attention even more deeply. And almost as if the timing has been arranged, that exact student is the next person called forward onto the stage. Jian suddenly gets a nasty idea and turns his attention toward the mysterious urban legend, mocking him with a grin, and telling him not to embarrass himself by ending up as E-rank trash like his roommates. He sneers that if Chen really produces that kind of result, the whole group will become a complete laughingstock, adding that people like them are already a disgrace just for showing up at such a prestigious event. Long immediately steps up for his friend, refusing to let Jian's words go unanswered, and boldly declares that Chen is about to shock every single person watching. The entire crowd falls into tense anticipation, their eyes fixed on Chen as they wait to see whether the rumors around him are real or just empty noise. Chen finally steps into the demon lair, and the instant he approaches, the demon heart seems to sense an overwhelming pressure closing in on it. At that moment, our hero remembers that for an awakener, the best path toward a secure future is to join a powerful, high-ranking guild. He knows that the only real way to reach that kind of future is to perform exceptionally well during the graduation combat assessment. During that assessment, every candidate has to choose their own teammates and build a full 10-person squad. The squad that finishes in first place will be recruited directly into the nation's top-tier Imperial Guild, which makes the true purpose of this test clear to every student present. Meanwhile, Jian is already busy recruiting, proudly bringing another low-tier D-rank student over and introducing him to his boss. He confidently announces that their party is now complete, explaining that they have already gathered all the D ranks along with the president's brother. So in his mind, there is absolutely no way they can lose first place. Jian understands the reality of this assessment very well. The strongest students will naturally gather together to create the most powerful party, while the weakest are forced to cling to one another. That turns the whole assessment into a cruel survival of the fittest battlefield, where anyone without enough strength can be pushed aside and eliminated without mercy. After some time passes, Long starts to grow uneasy, because the display screen still has not changed, and the silence around the result only makes the weight feel heavier. The crowd quickly jumps to the worst conclusion, whispering that Chen must be so weak that the system cannot even detect his presence properly. Jian then turns to Ting and says there is no point in staying any longer, claiming the remaining students are nothing but trash, and that watching them would only waste their time. But right as they are about to leave, the screen suddenly flickers, and the words "High D rank" appear, throwing the entire crowd into instant chaos. Shock spreads through the room like a wave, with students and teachers alike staring wide-eyed at the unexpected result. Even the president and the members of the student council are visibly shaken, their faces showing clear disbelief at what the machine has just revealed. Before anyone can fully process it, the system suddenly detects another strange shift in the evaluation results. It turns out Chen is using the system to test something for himself, checking how his level 10 base stats in his ordinary physical form translate under the assessment's measurement. After confirming that this normal state gives him a D rank, he switches his class to the Infernal Death King, the weakest of all the classes he has devoured so far. The result changes instantly, jumping from high D straight to mid-C, and the sudden leap leaves the crowd completely blown away. The student council can barely accept what they are seeing, struggling to believe that the assessment machine is still functioning the way it should. Even the scientists begin to question the situation, staring at the unstable readings and wondering why the results keep changing so wildly. Before long, they start suspecting the machine may be damaged beyond repair. At that exact moment, the demon heart itself becomes unstable, and the displayed results begin to shift strangely once again. Chen notices the abnormal reaction right away, and instead of stopping, he decides to switch into an even stronger class, transforming into the Purgatory Rakshasa. The demon heart grows increasingly anxious as violent energy surges around it, and outside the demon lair, a storm begins to gather with terrifying force. Jian shouts in complete confusion, treating the storm like some kind of celestial omen, as if history itself is being rewritten and their dorm has somehow produced a divine monster. In the very next moment, Chen's potential suddenly flickers to S rank, leaving both the scientist and President Ting frozen in stunned silence. But just when everyone thinks the shock has reached its limit, the system abruptly displays a warning. The warning states that the user's potential has exceeded the system's maximum load, making it impossible to detect his true limits under the current settings. Jian's mind almost crashes on the spot, as if his brain has been hit with a blue screen of death. The shock is so intense that for a moment, it looks like his soul is about to leave his body entirely. As the system starts breaking apart under that terrifying pressure, the scientists rush forward in complete panic. Their first thought is no longer the machine, but making sure the student inside doesn't get injured. But the moment they finally reach the testing area, every one of them freezes in place, their faces stiff with disbelief at what they are seeing. Where the demon heart should have been, all that remains is something shriveled and dry like an old raisin. The device has been completely burned out after being pushed far beyond what it could handle. In the end, it seems Chen may have frightened that demon heart just a little too badly. Even so, Chen still ends up devouring what is left of it. And from that, he gains a new ability. Now he can see other people's ranks directly, while also receiving warnings whenever danger is nearby. When he walks out of the demon lair, he is pleasantly surprised to find that everyone's rank now appears clearly in front of his eyes, almost like labels floating over them. But then he quickly notices something even more interesting. The president has been hiding his true potential, and beneath that impressive image, he is actually only a mediocre C rank at best. The scientists soon step out with awkward expressions and explain to everyone that the demon heart suffered what can only be called a heart attack from extreme overload, so the testing has to be paused for now. They classify Chen's abnormal stats as a possible error and announce that a full report will be submitted to the higher-ups for further review. As for the remaining students, they are told to return the next day when a replacement testing device will be ready. On the way back, Chen's roommates can barely contain themselves. After what he just did in front of the entire school, they hype him up like he has already become an absolute legend. Jian, on the other hand, clearly cannot swallow his jealousy, and the frustration is written all over his face. He angrily calls Chen a fraud, then demands compensation for breaking the machine and wasting the student council's time, acting exactly like a sore loser who cannot accept what just happened. Just as Chen's patience reaches its limit, and he looks ready to crush the guy right there, Ting suddenly steps in and immediately calls Jian out. The president warns him not to show disrespect toward their teammate, and the words hit Jian so hard that he is left completely stunned. Then Ting turns toward Chen and extends his hand, openly inviting this newly revealed powerhouse to join his team. With calm confidence, Ting promises that if they work together, they will without a doubt achieve the highest score the Academy has ever seen. Behind him, Jian starts to panic. He knows that if Chen joins, someone will have to be removed from the team to make room, and that decision will definitely create trouble with the brothers. Jian understands better than anyone that joining Ting's team is practically a guaranteed ticket to first place. That only makes him wonder what exactly is so special about Chen, especially when others couldn't buy their way onto the team no matter how desperately they tried. For the sake of the situation, Jian forces himself to swallow his pride. He slowly welcomes Chen onto the team and places a hesitant hand on his shoulder, even though his expression looks anything but sincere. Chen immediately slaps Jian's hand away without the slightest hesitation, making it clear that he has absolutely no interest in joining them. That answer makes Jian break into a nervous sweat, while Ting stays silent, watching Chen closely without saying a word. Unable to hold back, Jian snaps at Chen and tells him he has no idea what kind of opportunity he is rejecting. Their team is easily the strongest in the entire school, and everyone knows it. Chen simply turns his back and starts walking away, saying their business has nothing to do with him. To him, their whole group is just too noisy and annoying to deal with. Before leaving, he tells them not to bother him again. Jian stands there boiling with anger, furious after being rejected in such a blunt and public way. It does not take long for the entire school to start gossiping about Chen's refusal, and the news spreads through the academy almost instantly. Most students assume that after revealing a C rank, Chen must be planning to chase first place on his own, and with that, the whole school suddenly has a new drama to watch unfold right in front of them. Chen's roommates, meanwhile, are enjoying every second of it. Seeing the humiliated looks on Jian and Ting's faces after such a brutal public rejection is almost too satisfying for them. The president keeps his composure and calmly tells Jian not to worry, saying that if Chen has his own plans, then they should simply let him have them. From above, the principal watches the whole situation and lets out a disappointed sigh. He had truly hoped those boys would end up working together. In his mind, if they teamed up, they might have been able to break a new school record. But Ling sees it differently, pointing out that things have become far more interesting this way. She explains that Ting was raised in wealth and privilege, always used to getting what he wanted, so there is no way he will see this refusal as something harmless. Ling reminds the principal that once someone injures the president's pride, he is definitely not the kind of person who will simply let it go. Jian keeps grumbling in frustration, insisting that Chen only dares to act arrogant because a testing error happened to show him as a C rank. Ting, however, hints that the result may not be completely fake. Even if the chance is small, he admits that he cannot allow anyone to threaten his position as first place. Jian remembers that Chen is most likely just an ordinary student with no real battle experience. The student council members, however, are elites who secretly trained inside a demon lair to grow stronger, so he suggests going to teach Chen a lesson for being so disrespectful. Ting immediately cuts him off and asks, with a cold edge in his voice, whether Jian really thinks their president is petty enough to do something like that. Jian instantly realizes he has said the wrong thing and quickly apologizes. Ting then cancels their karaoke plans and tells Jian to handle the situation on his own. He adds coldly that whatever Jian decides to do from here has absolutely nothing to do with him. Chen understands the meaning hidden behind those words right away, seeing through the president's intentions without needing anything spelled out. Soon after, a spy approaches Jian and reports that Chen has already left the school, apparently heading home for a while. The spy also mentions that Chen did not even stop to eat before leaving, which makes the timing even more convenient for them. To Jian, this is perfect luck. His excitement rises as he imagines crushing Chen outside the academy, somewhere no teacher or student can step in to protect him. Meanwhile, as Chen crosses the street, a memory from his past life suddenly surfaces in his mind, dragging him back to a disaster he has not forgotten. In that past life, a top guild once attempted to clear a demon lair located in the Saint He country area. But inside that lair, they encountered a brand new monster known as Wrath. That creature wiped out the entire elite team so completely that they never even got the chance to fight back. After that, the monster escaped into the human world, spreading destruction everywhere it went, and causing massive damage on a terrifying scale. Although Chen's memory of the incident is still blurry, his goal is clear in this life. He is determined to locate that same demon lair before everything repeats itself. Begin putting that plan into motion, Chen first needs a large amount of money, so he heads straight for the Mithril Monster Exchange Center. He remembers very clearly that in the future this exchange center will rise into the largest trading hub in the entire country, making it the perfect place to start. In this world, an Awakener's strength isn't measured just by skill or power, it's deeply tied to the quality of their weapons and gear. That's why the Mithril Monster Exchange Center is so crucial. It's the ultimate hub for buying, selling, and upgrading the tools that define a fighter's real strength. Chen, however, isn't here for prestige or to admire rare weapons. He sees the center as a simple, fast way to earn some cash before moving on to bigger, more important plans. He steps inside and casually places a few monster fangs on the broker's counter. The broker leans in, scrutinizing them with a suspicious glare, clearly questioning how a mere student could have come by such items. "Where did a student like you get these?" the broker asks, still doubtful. Chen responds calmly, saying they dropped from a monster he defeated earlier. The broker's eyes widen in disbelief. He's never seen fangs quite like these before. Chen's assistant steps forward, explaining that the fangs come from an E-class monster known as a Sang Sin beast. She adds that these fangs can either be crafted into an E-grade weapon or ground into powder for various purposes, but the rude broker cuts her off, tossing the fang back onto the counter with a smirk. E-grade? That's practically worthless, he scoffs. Brags that the shop serves VIPs only, high-status awakeners dealing in D-grade items or better. That's his excuse for being completely unfamiliar with such a low-tier E-grade item. Inwardly, he complains about the lack of wealthy customers lately and sees no reason to waste his energy helping a low-level student. After all, it won't help his promotion prospects. Irritated, he labels Chen a nuisance and dumps the transaction on his assistant Li before striding away without another word. Li, however, remains polite. She hands Chen an envelope of cash and gently asks if he needs assistance with anything else. Chen opens the envelope to find 18,000 in currency. Smiling, he decides it's more than enough to cover his rent for now, leaving him stress-free. He then pulls out the glowing greatsword he obtained from the Purgatory Rakshasa. The moment the blade appears, Li's attention locks on it completely. She can't help but lean closer, eyes wide with curiosity. Though she has never seen anything like it, she guesses that the weapon must be at least B grade, maybe even A grade, given the faint aura it radiates. The broker returns and laughs derisively at her guess. A grade? Those cost around $1 million, he says. He boasts that after years of working here, he has never personally laid eyes on an A-grade item. At that moment, the shop owner walks in calmly. He glances at the sword and announces that it is neither A-grade nor B-grade. The broker immediately praises his boss's insight, smugly agreeing that a mere student could never possess such a valuable weapon. But the owner clarifies, revealing that the great sword comes from the Purgatory lands and is, in fact, an S-grade item. Both the broker and Li freeze mid-motion, completely shocked by this revelation. The owner steps forward, warmly shaking Chen's hand and welcoming him as an honored VIP guest of the exchange center. He gestures toward the VIP room and tells Chen to request anything he needs, making it clear that he is free to explore the finest items at his disposal. Chen feels an immediate sense of satisfaction. Everything is unfolding just as he had anticipated. The guild boss, Qingju, has finally appeared right on schedule, exactly when Chen planned it. Once they settle into the VIP room, Qingju turns to Chen and asks how much he wants to sell the greatsword for. Without hesitation, Chen names a price of 1 million, which leaves the green-haired guild boss momentarily stunned. The boss explains that such a weapon could easily fetch tens of millions due to its rarity and power, hinting at its incredible value. Chen calmly explains, however, that he isn't selling it outright. He just wants to use the greatsword as collateral for a 1-month loan of 1 million. This statement surprises Qingju even more. He immediately recognizes Chen's sharp intellect and begins to wonder exactly who this young man is. Chen continues, outlining that he will repay the principal in 30 days and cover the interest the following month. Before responding, the guild boss politely asks Li to step outside, wanting to discuss the terms privately with Chen. Once Li leaves, the man notes that he is aware Chen attends the National Awakener University, where seniors are about to graduate soon. He also mentions that he knows the graduation test is in 30 days, and that the prize money for first place is exactly 1 million, the perfect sum for this loan. Then he looks Chen in the eye and asks whether he is truly confident he will take first place in the upcoming test. Qingju immediately deduces that Chen must be desperate for money and wouldn't be taking this risk unless he had no other choice. After considering the situation, he offers to lend Chen 1.5 million instantly, with no interest whatsoever. He extends his hand with a warm smile, declaring that this is just the beginning of a beautiful partnership between them, and stands silently, momentarily speechless at the generosity of the offer. The man reassures him that not a single word of this deal will leave the room. All he asks in return is that Chen comes to his guild whenever he needs to trade anything else. Chen thinks to himself, amazed that this man saw right through the situation without trying to scam him. He now understands why Qingju becomes such a powerful and influential figure in the future. With that realization, Chen shakes the guild boss's hand, recognizing that building strong allies will be essential if he ever hopes to defeat the Demon Lord. A few moments later, the contract is signed, and the money is transferred to his account instantly, solidifying the deal. The guild boss then asks if Chen needs to borrow a weapon for the upcoming test, given that he just used the greatsword as collateral. Although the guild doesn't have any S-rank weapons available, they still have an impressive selection of high-quality A-rank gear for him to choose from. Chen shakes his head and tells him not to worry about it. Instead, he simply summons the other greatsword he acquired earlier, leaving the guild members completely awestruck. With everything settled, Chen takes his leave from the exchange center. Immediately after, the guild boss rewards the pink-haired girl for her role in bringing in such a high-level client, promoting her to supervisor. Before leaving completely, Chen realizes he forgot to pick up something and turns back toward the counter briefly. A few hours later, Chen is patiently waiting at a bus stop, his mind reflecting on past struggles. He recalls how in his previous life he had to fight tooth and nail to reach the top, and how the world treated him like nothing more than trash along the way. Back then, Chen worked shift after shift, with almost no room to breathe, pushing himself to the limit just so they could scrape together enough money to survive. Every month, he and his younger sister were forced to live on the edge, cutting every expense until their lives felt no different from being one step away from homelessness. At that time, his sister Si-Yoon had actually been accepted into the university she had always dreamed of attending. But when the chance finally came, she gave it up and casually said the school was simply too far away from her brother. But Chen knew the truth deep down. Si-Yoon was not worried about distance at all. She was afraid that chasing her own dream would place an even heavier financial weight on his already exhausted shoulders. Back in the present, Chen stands there waiting, his eyes scanning through the people around him as unease slowly rises in his chest. He cannot help wondering why Si-yun still has not appeared, so he starts looking around more carefully. Right then, a familiar voice suddenly rings out from nearby, scolding him without mercy and calling him an idiot for searching around the entrance when he should have been waiting near the exit. It is Si-yun. She drags a huge suitcase behind her with both hands, looking completely worn out, and immediately complains that they are broke again because the rent has swallowed up almost every bit of money they had left. But Chen does not answer right away. He just stands frozen in place, his eyes locked on her face, because for him, it has already been 7 long years since the last time he saw his sister alive in front of him. Si-yun, not noticing the storm of emotions crashing through him, casually tells him to stop standing around and come help her carry her bags. When Chen still gives no reaction, she leans closer and waves her hand back and forth in front of his eyes, trying to pull him out of his daze and figure out what is wrong with him. Then before she can say anything else, Chen suddenly rushes forward and wraps his arms around her tightly, holding her so firmly that Si-yun is completely caught off guard. After a few stiff and awkward seconds, Si-yun finally starts poking him hard in the sides to force him to let go, grumbling that he is squeezing her so much she can barely breathe. She frowns at him and says he has been acting really strange lately, even teasing that maybe the girl he likes finally turned him down. Chen, however, only brushes it aside, refusing to explain what is truly going on inside him. Soon after, the two of them begin walking side by side, with Si-yun pulling her suitcase along while she keeps talking non-stop about her exams and everything that happened recently. Chen listens to every word with quiet happiness, his gaze softening as he walks beside her. In his heart, he makes a silent vow that in this life, no matter what happens, he will never allow anything terrible to reach his sister again. Meanwhile, in another part of the city, a dark alley sits heavy with silence as several thugs hide in the shadows, waiting for their chance to strike. After confirming that Chen will definitely pass through this area, their leader Jian orders his men to keep their heads down and stay hidden until the target arrives, so they can all rush him together in one ambush. A twisted grin spreads across Jian's face as he thinks about Chen, and in his mind he swears that this time he will make Chen pay properly for everything he has done. One of the thugs hesitates and asks nervously whether they might get into serious trouble if the situation goes too far. Cloud Assassin coldly replies that at first, he only planned to teach that guy a small lesson. But after their recent encounter, his anger has burned far beyond that. Remembering the humiliation Chen forced him to swallow, Jian tells his goons not to take all the fun for themselves. He wants to personally deal with Chen and give him a lesson he will remember for the rest of his life. Jian keeps bragging to himself that he is the greatest cloud assassin around, almost drooling as he imagines Chen's face twisting with fear and despair once he finally corners him. As Chen and Si-yun continue walking together, Si-yun glances at him from the side and points out that he has been acting off lately, wondering aloud if the pressure from exams has started getting to him. But almost immediately, she waves it off with a teasing tone, saying that a weakling like him should not think too deeply about things that are too heavy for his little brain. Then she reminds him of the very advice he once gave her: no matter what kind of trouble comes, they just need to keep moving forward and leave the rest to fate. Wanting to cheer him up, Si-yun suddenly starts singing a motivational song in a bright, playful voice as the two of them step deeper into the alley. Chen feels a small warmth in his chest, pleasantly surprised that Si-yun can notice even the slightest change in his mood. Still, he also realizes that she has no idea he has awakened new powers, let alone gained the wealth to change their lives. When Chen answers with calm confidence and tells her he is completely fine, Si-yun narrows her eyes a little, wondering whether this is really reassurance or just his stubborn male pride talking. Si-yun shakes her head with a faint smile, quietly thinking to herself that her brother really does seem to be growing into a man at last. Behind them, one of the thugs carefully follows at a distance, then leans toward Jian and reports that their target is not alone. Chen is walking with a girl. Instead of being bothered, Jian becomes even more excited. His eyes light up as he remembers that this alley has no cameras, meaning they can act freely without worrying about being caught. But Chen instantly senses the malice creeping up behind them. Without even needing to turn fully, he realizes these are the same pieces of trash from the student council. Keeping his expression steady, Chen takes out a pair of wireless earbuds and gently places them into Si-yun's ears. He tells her to listen to a song he has started enjoying recently, making his voice sound casual, so she will not notice the danger closing in behind them. Si-yun is a little surprised, since Chen almost never listens to music, but she accepts it anyway, thinking that maybe this is a chance to understand this strange new side of her brother a bit better. Only after the music begins to cover her ears does Chen slowly turn around. His eyes sharpen like blades as he stares down the scumbags advancing toward them. With the song playing clearly in Si-yun's ears, the thugs suddenly charge forward from the alley shadows, and in the next instant the fight erupts. Chen instantly switches into his lightning class, electricity-like power surging through his body. In his mind, he remembers that 7 years have passed since he lost his sister, and now that he has finally gotten her back, he refuses to let anyone threaten her again. Rage flashes through him as he wonders where these lowlifes found the courage to attack them. Then Chen shoots forward with terrifying speed, moving like a bolt of lightning tearing through the alley. The first thug barely has time to react before Chen's kick slams into him with brutal force, sending him flying backward and making the others break into a cold sweat. Chen does not slow down for even a second. He charges power into his fist and punches 3 attackers one after another, then closes in on the 4th and finishes him with a vicious knee strike. One of the remaining goons somehow gathers the courage to rush in and attack, but Chen simply reaches out and catches his hand. With almost no effort at all, Chen crushes and snaps it as easily as breaking a piece of dry spaghetti. The thug screams in agony, clutching at his ruined hand, but Chen gives him no chance to recover and drives a heavy punch straight into his nose. Watching his men get tossed around like they are nothing, Jian freezes where he stands, his confidence crumbling as he wonders how Chen could have suddenly become this strong. But Chen still does not stop. He keeps throwing punches left and right, knocking down anyone who gets in his way while steadily forcing his way toward the Cloud Assassin. When Chen finally reaches him, Jian stiffens and desperately tries to convince himself that he is still the strongest assassin alive. Jian shouts that he cannot possibly lose, but Chen answers with action instead of words, smashing him with a devastating punch that rips him out of his delusion and sends him flying. Chen immediately rushes after him, giving Jian no breathing room and unleashes a brutal chain of punches that knocks several of his teeth loose. The Cloud Assassin rolls violently across the ground, his body scraping through the alley before he finally crashes hard into a wall. When Jian struggles to lift his head, the first thing he sees is Chen standing right in front of him, staring down at him with the terrifying pressure of a demon. Chen stands over the defeated Jian, looking down at him like he is nothing more than garbage on the ground. In a cold voice, he reminds this piece of trash that he already gave him a warning before and told him clearly to stay away. His gaze cuts straight through Jian, sharp enough to feel like it is staring into the man's soul. Then Chen asks whether brainless scum like him cannot even understand the most basic words when another human being speaks. By this point, Jian is beaten so badly that he barely even looks like the arrogant assassin from before. His legs have gone completely numb, and half the bones in his body feel as if they have been shattered beyond repair. Only now does Jian finally understand that he picked a fight with the absolute worst person possible, broken and terrified. He can barely move his mouth as he forces out a weak, pathetic apology. Chen does not let him keep talking. He grabs Jian by the collar, yanks him close, and presses a cold dagger right against his face, instantly choking off whatever excuse he was trying to make. As Jian stares into Chen's eyes from that close, the so-called top assassin finally sees the truth with perfect clarity. There is no fear in Chen's eyes, and not even the slightest hesitation to kill. That kind of pressure is impossible for an ordinary high school student to have. Jian's mind trembles as he wonders what kind of nightmare a person must have lived through to become someone as terrifying and monstrous as Chen. With cold malice dripping from every word, Chen tells the broken boy to carve this warning into his memory if he does not want to experience this nightmare a second time. He makes it clear that if they ever try anything stupid again, he will not hesitate for even a second to tear them apart. Then, to drive the warning even deeper, Chen adds one final condition in an even colder voice. If they so much as come within a mile of his sister, Chen will gladly track down every person connected to them and erase them one by one. Once his message is delivered, Chen lets the dagger drop and calmly walks back towards Si-Yun as if nothing happened, returning to her side before the background song even has time to finish. Meanwhile, Si-Yun is completely lost in the music, her emotions swelling until tears gather in her eyes. The lonely, heartbreaking lyrics hit her so hard that she can barely hold herself together. She cries quietly, feeling both heartbroken and confused as she wonders what her brother must have gone through over the years to change so much. For a moment, she even questions whether the support she gave him back then was never truly enough. After wiping at her tears, Si-Yun suddenly turns around with fresh determination, ready to give Chen a proper scolding for making her worry like this. But the words catch in her throat before she can finish. The moment her eyes land on the gift in Chen's hand, she freezes on the spot. Right there in front of her is the shiny, gold-plated pen she has always dreamed of owning, gleaming beautifully as if it has been pulled straight out of her imagination. Si-Yun's face instantly turns bright red, and excitement floods through her so intensely that she almost forgets how to speak. She can hardly believe Chen actually bought her the newest holographic magic pen, especially when that single item costs even more than their entire monthly rent. Her adorable reaction immediately melts Chen's heart. Just from the Chen quietly clenches his fist behind his back, making another vow deep inside. In this life, he will protect that smile no matter what, and he will make sure Si-Yun gets into the dream school she gave up before. Later, back at home, Si-Yun spends hours happily playing with the pen, tracing glowing holographic drawings through the air as light dances around the room. Chen sits nearby, quietly eating a bowl of homemade ramen she prepared for him. as he watches how much she loves the gift. A genuine warmth settles in his chest. Still, reality soon catches up with Si-Yun. Even while she loves the pen, she cannot help worrying that Chen spent so much money on her when they still have not even covered next month's rent. Chen only gives her a proud, reassuring smile and then reveals something she never expected. Their rent for the entire year has already been paid in full. He casually claims that a small business venture with a friend has been making a lot of profit lately. But Si-Yun is far too sharp to accept that so easily, and she immediately shoots him a suspicious glare. From the look in her eyes, it is clear that she is not buying this unbelievably convenient business story for even a second. Even so, she decides not to press him any further. After all, she can barely remember the last time she saw her big brother laughing this openly and freely. So instead of interrogating him, Si-Yun gently pats him on the shoulder and gives him one simple request. Whatever secret side hustle he has gotten himself involved in, he just needs to promise that he will not push himself until he burns out. Meanwhile, at a quiet aquarium, Student Council President Ting stands with his cousin and shares a piece of shocking news with her. According to the best doctors in the city, their top assassin has been injured so severely that there is basically no hope of recovery. More than half the bones in Jian's body are shattered beyond repair. The fact that he fought Chen at all was already unexpected, but the terrifying condition he ended up in afterward is even more unbelievable. His cousin reacts with a chilling lack of concern. Instead of caring about Jian's fate, her only disappointment is that the number of elite graduate students joining his team has now gone down. But President Ting is just as ruthless. He brushes the loss aside without the slightest pity, saying he will probably perform even better without some useless NPC dragging him down. At that moment, their uncle speaks up as well, a man who also holds the position of the Academy's Director of Employment. Director Gong Xuan calmly begins giving his official report, laying out the results of his investigation into Chen's recent actions. His detailed investigation into the chaos at the ranking ceremony has finally reached a conclusion, and the evidence leaves no room for argument. The result is undeniable. Chen's true ranking is actually higher than Student Council President Ting's. That revelation hits the former top student like a sudden shock, catching him completely off guard and freezing his confidence for a moment. Director Gong Xuan then offers him a stern warning. He reveals that Ting's father has personally asked a vice chairman of the alliance to evaluate Ting's performance in the upcoming combat exam. Because of that, Ting has to make sure he shines brighter than everyone else. Still, in case he somehow fails to secure the spotlight, the director presents a backup plan. The green-haired girl, who also happens to be his uncle's favorite niece, will join Ting's team to make sure they secure first place overall. But the arrogant student council president rejects the offer immediately, without even taking a moment to think it over. He proudly claims that during the initial assessment, he did not even use a fraction of his real strength. Completely convinced of his own superiority, President Ting assures them that he alone is enough to dominate the entire academy. Back at the academy dorms, Chen washes himself off after finishing another brutal daily training session, a grueling 100-mile run while carrying a heavily weighted backpack. His mind is locked onto a single goal now. He has to win the $1 million prize waiting at the end of the upcoming graduation exam. That prize is his only real chance to keep his deal with Qingji from the Mithril Guild and build a profitable trade relationship that benefits both sides. With only a few short weeks left before the major exam arrives, Chen finally lies down in bed, letting his exhausted body rest, while his focus remains fixed on what comes next. But Chen does not lie down just to rest his tired body. Even in sleep, he plans to keep pushing forward, grinding relentlessly without wasting a single moment. As his consciousness sinks into his demonic lair, Chen finds himself standing before Demon King Lan Yu's enormous void tower, its dark structure rising high above him like a monument from another world. Without the slightest hesitation in his steps, he moves straight toward it, climbing the long and oppressive staircase that stretches all the way up to the tower's entrance. Previously, when Chen used his Gravehound King class for his first assessment, the result had landed at a respectable mid-C rank. Things were completely different with his Abyssal Fiend class. Its raw power was so overwhelming that it completely overloaded the Academy's normal rating system. Even the Demon Heart itself could not properly measure it, as if the class's true potential was far beyond what its classification could handle. Because of that, Chen realizes there is only one clear way to accurately judge the strength of his remaining classes. He has to unlock the Void Tower and test their destructive power directly in real combat, where numbers and ratings can no longer hide the truth. As Chen steps inside the tower, curiosity burns in his eyes. He cannot help wondering what kind of brutal and nightmarish trial this place is about to throw at him, but the instant he sees what is waiting beyond the entrance, his eyes widen in complete shock. In the blink of an eye, Chen is transported into a strange dimension, suddenly standing on the surface of a massive white planet suspended in the middle of space. The moment he tries to take his first step, his body buckles under the pressure, and he drops to one knee, barely managing to keep himself from collapsing completely. This place is known as the Fallen Star Wastes, where gravity is 10 times stronger than on Earth, and Chen can feel that crushing weight pressing deep into his bones. When he turns back, the entrance to the tower has already vanished behind him. Chen immediately understands what that means. The only way to reopen the exit is to defeat the boss. So he has to adapt fast before any monster gets the chance to ambush him. Unfortunately, a phantom lion prowling nearby has no intention of giving him that time. With danger closing in and no other choice left, Chen instantly switches into his lightning class. The phantom lion lunges at him with terrifying speed, but Chen narrowly slips away at the last second and drives his blade straight into its shoulder. The beast roars furiously from the pain, yet the attack fails to cause serious damage because Chen's strike misses the vital points. Chen quickly realizes the problem. Under this crushing gravity, even his attacks have become slow, awkward, and sloppy, just like his movements. Before he can properly recover, the phantom lion easily forces him to the ground and pins him down, lowering its jaws as it tries to tear a bite out of him. That moment makes the difference painfully clear. These monsters have already adapted perfectly to the extreme gravity, while Chen is still struggling just to move. Chen lets the lion bite into his arm for a brief moment, enduring the pain just long enough to switch into his abyssal fiend class. The instant the change takes effect, his body is filled with a completely different kind of stat boost. By giving up some of his speed, Chen gains a huge increase in raw strength and stamina, exactly the kind of power he needs for close-range combat under this pressure. The shift in class immediately turns the battle around, and Chen slams the aggressive beast down with enough force to flip the entire fight in his favor. Rakshasa's gravity manipulation proves to be incredibly useful here. On a planet where gravity is already 10 times stronger than normal, adding a 3 times multiplier makes every impact brutally heavy. The phantom lion roars in rage and struggles beneath him, but Chen shows it absolutely no mercy, crushing the beast straight down into the ground. After finally defeating it, Chen collapses onto the floor and sprawls out on his back, trying to catch his breath under the crushing weight of the planet. Then gluttony suddenly surprises him with a well-earned level-up notification, giving him at least 1 reward for surviving that brutal fight. From there, Chen learns something important. Every class he owns has its own star rating. Those stars represent how much his stats increase whenever he switches into that class. And right now, Purgatory Rakshasa has the highest star rating out of every option available to him. But even with that powerful advantage on his side, Chen still had to fight for his life just to defeat a single B-rank phantom lion. That truth makes one thing painfully obvious. Chen is still nowhere near reaching the full potential of his SSS rank talent. To make the situation even more frustrating, he notices that gluttony does not even give him the option to absorb the creature he just defeated. And since the exit still has not appeared after the phantom lion's death, Chen realizes this monster clearly was not the floor boss. Then, without warning, a massive door suddenly opens behind him. From within the darkness beyond the doorway, dozens of glowing eyes slowly appear, all staring directly at him. Reality crashes down on Chen all at once. The effort it took to defeat just one phantom lion was nothing compared to the nightmare that is about to come next. Countless B-rank monsters pour out through the door, rushing at him from every direction as claws, fangs, and bodies swarm over him all at once. Only now does Chen truly understand what Rakshasa was trying to warn him about. The demon had already told him that the tower was filled with merciless beasts, and that every step forward would be paved with endless pain and suffering. But Rakshasa had also made it clear that Chen had to endure all of it if he wanted to adapt, survive, and grow stronger. Chen suddenly jolts awake from his sleep, his body snapping up as if he has just clawed his way out of the worst nightmare of his life. Everyone else in the room is still sleeping peacefully, completely unaware that Chen has just experienced the agony of being ripped apart by monsters. At last, Chen understands the truth. Purgatory's Void Tower is not some easy shortcut that will let him level up instantly. He is only standing at the very beginning of a long, brutal, and painful road. A few weeks pass, and at long last, the day of the Academy's graduation exam finally arrives. Many VIPs have gathered to watch the new batch of promising students, their eyes fixed on the young talents who may soon rise through the ranks. Before the exam begins, a new rule for team formation is announced. Every party must include at least one student who has reached high E rank. It is finally time for the students to form their teams. Another announcement follows. From this point on, all students are able to see each other's ranks. With everyone's strength now visible, the students can quickly judge who is worth recruiting and decide who they want to bring into their group. The student rankings are displayed in a clear order, starting from the highest-ranked students at the very top and moving all the way down to the weakest names at the bottom. But as Ma Long scans through the list, his expression quickly changes. He notices something strange almost immediately. Like one detail on the board does not make any sense. Chen is just as confused. When his eyes finally land on his own name, he finds it sitting all the way at the very bottom of the list, as if his previous results never existed. In an instant, everyone's attention shifts toward him. The students all stare in disbelief, wondering how someone known as a high-grade awakener could possibly be placed in the lowest position. The jealous students seize the chance right away, whispering and mocking him as they convince themselves that his original high rank must have been nothing more than a testing mistake. Even so, no matter how much they talk trash, they cannot fully deny Chen's real strength. Deep down, they all know that if he joined their team, their final score would rise by a huge amount. Student Council President Ting stays silent as the room fills with whispers. Around him, people quietly gossip about the fool who must now regret rejecting the president's invitation. But the person truly pulling the strings behind this dirty move is none other than President Ting's own uncle, Gong Xuan. Gong Xuan had already calculated everything. If Chen's name appeared at the bottom, no one would dare invite him into their party. And if Chen could not even qualify for the test, then he would never get the chance to challenge the president's team. A few hours earlier, the entire classroom had practically swarmed around President Ting, begging and pleading for the chance to join his team. They showered him with praise, trying every flattering line they could think of, but Cheng shut them down coldly and made it clear that their team only had room for one more person. Now, back in the present, almost every other student has already found a group, leaving only the weakest dorm standing there, with no one willing to join them. Ma Long explains that they already tried asking everyone they could, but every single person turned them down, refusing to team up with their dorm. At the moment, they only have 4 people, and because of that, they do not meet the requirement to participate in the graduation test. He complains that the timing is way too suspicious. Chen's score was suddenly pushed down to the lowest rank, making him look unqualified right when the team needed him most, since the rules now require every group to have at least one high-level E-rank student. It feels painfully obvious that their dorm has been targeted on purpose. And this is not just some ordinary school event. The graduation test is the only real stage where students can prove their talent and attract attention from powerful guilds. For the final test, the number of team members directly affects how many monsters the group has to face, which means having more people does not automatically give a team an advantage. That is exactly why no one wants to get involved with the weaker students. To everyone else, they would only increase the danger while dragging the whole team down. To make the situation even worse, the 3 lowest-ranked students all happen to come from the same dorm, leaving Chen's group completely isolated from the rest. At that moment, another student calls out to Zuo, telling him that their team is only missing one final person. The guy tries to pressure him with a fake friendly tone, saying Zuo surely does not want to fail the graduation test by staying with his weak dorm mates. Chen watches the situation unfold and quickly understands the danger. If things continue like this, there is a very real chance that all of them will be shut out before the competition even begins. But the dorm king refuses without hesitation, standing firm. He says he will never abandon his roommates just to save himself. The other group leaves in anger after being rejected, but Zuo still warns them on the way out, not to look down on other people so easily. After checking the student list again, Ma Long announces with a grim face that almost everyone has already locked in their teams. Their group only needs one more person to qualify, but no matter where they look, nobody is willing to take that final spot. Chen's eyes move toward the director, and that is when he notices something important. The man shares the same last name as the student council president. With that one clue, Chen immediately sees through the dirty tricks being played behind the scenes. He cannot help wondering whether Gong Xuan really sees him as such a huge threat that he would go this far just to block him. Chen does not lose hope. Instead, he declares that he will definitely participate in the tournament, and lightning power begins to crackle around him. Since the others have already made their hatred this obvious, Chen tells himself there is no reason for him to keep holding back anymore. As his energy bursts outward, Chen steps forward with confidence, and even the officials in charge are startled by the sudden display of power. Even his own dorm mates stare at him in surprise, their faces filled with confusion as they try to understand what he is planning. Chen remembers that every Awakener school has one special rule. In order to create a truly competitive environment, students are allowed to challenge anyone at any time. On the surface, it might look like nothing more than showing off, but in reality, this is one of the fastest ways for a student to display their strength and earn recognition. In most situations, plenty of people would simply refuse the challenge and avoid fighting altogether. However, Chen knows one thing for certain. The student council president's pride will never allow him to back down in front of everyone. As long as Chen defeats that blonde guy in public, every student here will suddenly want him on their team. But before anything can happen, a girl appears at the doorway and calls out to Chen, asking if his team still needs one more member. She calmly adds that she also wants to participate in this year's graduation test, as if joining them is the most natural choice in the world. The vice president then points out that she had already reached D rank back in middle school, so Chen does not need to worry about her holding the team back. Chen's dorm mates instantly lose their minds, staring at her in shock and wondering how Chen somehow managed to get such a beautiful girl to stand on his side. Cheng and Ting both look completely confused by the sudden turn of events, while director Gong Xuan nearly chokes on his water from the shock. The surrounding students immediately start gossiping again, whispering among themselves as they wonder why an exchange student would ever choose to join the lowest-ranked team in the entire test. Most of them do not really know who she is, but there is already a rumor going around that she comes from the Saint Kingdom. Director Gong Xuan's face darkens with anger, and he immediately tells her that exchange students are not allowed to participate in the school's graduation test. He goes even further, saying that Ling has never taken any rank tests at this academy, and has never officially proven her rank here, which clearly violates the rules. Just then, the principal suddenly appears and calmly says that the director is correct. The moment Gong Xuan sees the old man standing there, his expression changes completely, and he is visibly shocked by the principal's sudden arrival. The principal looked at Ling with a calm, measuring gaze and asked why she was so eager to take part in the test, especially when everyone knew she would only be staying at the school for a short period of time. Chen froze for a moment, completely caught off guard. His eyes shifted toward the principal as one thought flashed through his mind. How had a warrior-class expert suddenly moved like he had teleported? The old man then explained in a steady voice that letting Ling join the test would be unfair to the other students, and Ling, instead of arguing back, simply went along with his words as if she understood the point. A cold sweat started to run down Chen's face as the realization hit him. No matter how carefully he looked, he could not sense the true rank of either of these two people. After holding himself back for a while, the director finally gathered enough courage to speak. He stepped forward and backed up the principal's decision, saying that a school could never operate properly if it ignored its own rules. But then the principal's tone suddenly softened, and he began explaining that the school's real purpose was not just to enforce rules, but to give awakeners a place to learn, improve, and eventually accomplish something meaningful with their lives. He continued by saying that although the graduation test had always been treated as a school tradition, it was also one of the most important turning points in any student's life. Then he asked, if a student lost the chance to participate just because the rules were suddenly changed, how could the school possibly make up for that kind of loss? Director's confidence began to crumble, and sweat poured down his forehead as he wondered in panic whether his little plan had finally been seen through. His mind raced as he looked at the principal, silently questioning whether all of this pressure was actually being applied for Chen's sake. After weighing the situation, the director quickly realized that pushing any further would only bring him more trouble, so he decided it was better to step back for now. He comforted himself by thinking that the strongest students had already formed their own team anyway, so no matter what rule changes happened, they should still have no problem winning the test. The director lowered his head toward the principal and apologized, admitting that they had failed to consider how this system might block certain students from receiving a chance to grow. Then, raising his voice for everyone to hear, he announced that in order to keep the test fair, even lower-ranked teams and groups with fewer than 5 members would now be allowed to participate. With that announcement, the 4 dorm mates were finally able to form their team. Their faces lit up as they celebrated, realizing they really had earned a place in the graduation test. From his seat in the back, the principal glanced at Ling and casually remarked that she seemed just a little too interested in Chen. On one side of the test stood the student council president, leading a lineup filled with the school's strongest players. On the other side, Chen stood with the 3 students, everyone considered the weakest. That contrast made the old man even more curious. He wondered which cave these 2 teams would choose, and just how many points they would be able to earn in the end. Soon after, the official stepped forward and announced that all team captains could now select the Devil's Cave their team would enter. Almost immediately, his tablet let out a sharp ding. The sound startled him, because one of the captains had already locked in a choice. The moment everyone saw which cave Chen had selected, the room seemed to freeze, and shocked voices broke out from every direction. Chen's own dorm mates panicked on the spot. They rushed to tell him to change his choice right away, asking if he even understood what he had just done. But Chen did not answer them. He stayed quiet, his eyes fixed on the screen in front of him, as if his decision had already been made. In the graduation test, each team of students would enter a devil's cave, fight the monsters inside, and earn points based on the enemies they defeated. Taking down monster lords would grant extra points, and clearing the dungeon quickly would also add a separate score bonus. After that, the difficulty level of the dungeon would determine the multiplier applied to the team's total score. An F-rank dungeon could award up to 75 points, while an E-rank dungeon raised the maximum possible score to 100 points. The team with the highest final score would catch the attention of the Imperial Guild, and the single top-performing student would receive a reward of 1 million yuan. Inside the selection room, the students began talking among themselves, saying that the highest score ever recorded was 90 points, a record set by the current leader of the Imperial Guild. They also knew that even clearing an E-rank dungeon usually required at least 3 reliable D-rank fighters, which was why many believed Ting's team might actually break that historic record this year. Just as the discussion grew louder, the display suddenly rang with another ding, announcing to everyone that someone had already chosen a Devil's Cave. One student stared at the screen in disbelief, shocked to see that Chen had actually selected a D-rank dungeon. No team had ever cleared a D-rank dungeon in the history of the test, so everyone immediately wondered whether Chen had simply pressed the wrong option by mistake. Long turned to Chen and bluntly asked if he had hit his head, while the Dorm King practically lost control in front of the screen, unable to believe what he was seeing. The nerd quickly tried to reason with Chen, hoping to talk him out of it, but Chen calmly revealed that he had thought about this choice for a long time before making it. Before the room could settle down, the system dinged once again. And this time, the student council president also selected the D-rank cave. Ting's teammates did not hesitate at all. The moment their leader made his choice, they accepted it immediately, officially securing their team's qualification for the test. The classroom erupted at the announcement, with students shouting and reacting everywhere, while Ting's group tried to look calm and unfazed, as if this outcome was only natural. A blonde goth girl glanced toward Chen and mocked him sharply, assuming he was only pretending to be fearless because he wanted everyone's attention. A bald student joined in as well, saying that Chen's weak teammates would never go along with such a reckless choice, and that his team would fall apart before the test even began. Long, however, kept watching Chen's face closely, and the more he looked, the more he realized that Chen was not joking at all. He could not help wondering when his friend had become this daring, and how much Chen had changed without him fully noticing. After a brief moment of hesitation, the nerd finally made up his mind. He reached out and pressed the confirm button, choosing to put his trust in his friend. Yeo followed right after him, hitting the green button as well, thinking that, at this point, he had nothing left to lose anyway. The dorm king grew irritated when he saw the others had already made their decisions before him, so with a frustrated expression, he pressed the button too. And with all 4 members confirming their choice, the system officially recognized their team and qualified them for the graduation test. Chen looked at his dorm mates and apologized sincerely, admitting that he had chosen this dungeon because he wanted to become the top scorer. He knew very well that he was dragging them into his own dream, but he still reassured them with firm confidence that they would climb all the way to the top together. After hearing those words, the president rose from his seat and declared in a cold, confident voice that the #1 position belonged to him alone. Chen slowly turned around and faced him head-on, meeting the president's challenge without backing away. Ting's expression turned sharp as a heavy, intimidating aura burst out from him, pressing down on the room. With absolute confidence, he declared that in this school, there could only be one student who stood at the very top. From where she stood in the back, Ling watched him with clear surprise in her eyes. This was the first time she had ever seen Ting reveal such intense emotions so openly. And just like that, the tension between them could no longer be hidden. Chen and Ting's rivalry had finally been brought out into the open for everyone to see. The principal felt a quiet sense of pride as he looked at these fearless students, but Ling could not shake off her worry. After all, Chen had chosen a D-rank cave, a place so dangerous that even a C-rank fighter would struggle to clear it alone. It was true that clearing a D-rank cave could bring in as many as 150 points, but the reward came with a terrifying level of difficulty that no one could casually ignore. And the bigger problem was that Chen's teammates were not exactly suited for a challenge like that either, making the choice look even more reckless from the outside. The principal added that with only 1 month left before the test, it would be almost impossible for Chen's team to improve enough to handle something on that level. Even so, despite knowing how slim their chances looked, the old man still chose to hope that they might somehow pull through. 2 weeks later at the training grounds, the mood was completely different. Everyone was sprawled across the floor, breathing hard, their bodies pushed so far past their limits that they could barely move. Long, lying there in exhaustion, could not help asking why they were being forced through brutal physical training when the other students were all comfortably practicing through simulation training. Chen had dragged them through one exhausting exercise after another, pushing their bodies non-stop until frustration started building up in every single one of them. But Chen calmly explained that simulation training was basically useless for what they were about to face. He told them that the first time someone entered a devil's cave, panic would hit so hard that their mind would go completely blank, and in that moment, only their instincts could keep them alive. That was why he was forcing them through physical training. Their bodies needed to become stronger, faster, and sharper, so they could move and react before fear swallowed them whole. Of course, the best possible training would be entering a real dungeon and gaining actual battle experience. But for ordinary students like them, that kind of opportunity was nothing more than a dream. Only the elite students were given chances like that, as if real experience belonged exclusively to those already standing above everyone else. And it did not stop there. The elites worked hard to make sure ordinary people never caught up, keeping the gap wide enough so they could remain at the top without being challenged. They had access to training resources, dungeon opportunities, and powerful support that regular people could spend their entire lives chasing and still never touch. Hearing all of that, the dorm king frowned and asked the obvious question. If the system was already stacked against them, then what were ordinary people supposed to do? Chen answered by revealing his real plan. If they could make it into the Imperial Guild, then they would finally gain the power and position needed to change the entire system from within. And right now, the graduation test was the only real opening they had. The one chance that could let them break past the elites and stand above them. With that dream burning in his chest, Chen promised himself that he would do absolutely everything possible to keep his word. And with firm conviction, he guaranteed that they would win. With only half a month remaining before the graduation exam, Chen pushed himself even harder, entering the Void Tower every single night while everyone else was resting. Taking down the Phantom Lions was far from easy. They battered him again and again. But no matter how badly he was beaten, Chen refused to stay down or give up. Then, with just 5 days left before the exam, his roommates were also training with everything they had, forcing their tired bodies to keep moving. Chen, however, was already on a completely different level. His training was so intense that even the harshest routine the others could imagine looked like a simple warm-up beside it. With only 2 days remaining, his rival was clearly not wasting time either, continuing to train seriously as the final countdown to the exam drew closer. But Chen's growth was happening even faster. By now, he could stand under crushing gravity and confidently fight against an entire pack of lions without losing his nerve. Blood ran down his face, but his eyes were sharper than ever. In that battered, determined state, Chen looked more prepared to win than he ever had before. On the day of the exam, a small drone floated near the gathered students, hovering in the air as it prepared to guide them through the test. The boys arrived together in matching outfits, walking in with a clean, sharp look that made them seem far more serious than before. Once every student had put on their wristband, the signal was given, and the graduation exam officially began. Outside the exam area, the academy principal stepped forward with a warm smile and personally greeted Gong Lin. This sharp-looking man was none other than President Ting's father, as well as one of the co-founders of the Imperial Guild. The students could not stop staring at him. To them, the Imperial Guild co-founder was so famous and unreachable that they looked at him like some rare creature on display. Their curiosity only grew stronger when they saw the principal and the guild co-founder turn their attention toward a luxurious white limo arriving nearby. Car door opened, and a red-haired man named Carl Cavendish stepped out calmly, carrying himself with the relaxed confidence of someone used to commanding attention. The moment the students recognized him, they completely lost their composure because standing before them was the vice chairman of the World Guild Alliance. A person of his status would normally never bother visiting a place like this, which made his sudden appearance feel even more unbelievable. Inside the VIP room, the director reported to the special guests that 23 teams had chosen to challenge F-rank demon lairs, a few groups had selected E-rank lairs, and only 2 daring teams had picked D-rank lairs. Alliance Secretary Sigrid looked genuinely surprised by that information. Because of that, she turned to the academy officials and asked whether they had truly considered the safety of the students before allowing this. Hearing her concern, the director stayed calm and explained that the students were fully aware of the danger they had chosen to face. He made it clear that awakeners without real combat experience often had trouble even when facing F-rank monsters, no matter how confident they seemed beforehand. The true danger inside a lair was always the boss, because the boss was far stronger and far more dangerous than the ordinary monsters roaming around. That was exactly why so many teams failed in the end. They could survive the weaker monsters, only to collapse when they reached the boss. E-rank lairs, however, were on a completely different level. Even the basic monsters inside were already as strong as an F-rank boss, a brutal truth most students only understood after experiencing it themselves. Hearing this, the Alliance Secretary immediately asked whether there were any safeguards in place if the situation became too dangerous. The director assured her without hesitation that the Academy placed great importance on protecting its top students. To make sure nothing went out of control, a warrior from the Imperial Guild had been stationed outside every lair, ready to rush in the moment something went wrong. On top of that, every student's wristband had an emergency function. If they chose to surrender, or if their life was truly in danger, it could instantly teleport them out to safety. Even after hearing about the safety measures, the lady still could not fully relax in her eyes. The Academy simply did not seem to have students capable of conquering a D-rank lair, and she quietly wondered how long those 2 teams could really last once they were trapped inside. The director, however, already had his own prediction. He was convinced that those young E-rank students would not hold out for long, and would probably come rushing back out in tears before things went too far. Meanwhile, deep inside the D-rank dungeon, enormous frozen trees towered all around them like icy giants, and Chen's teammates were visibly shaken as they stared into the chilling darkness ahead. And honestly, anyone would have been terrified after seeing the monsters lurking there. Those nightmare creatures looked like some twisted mix of bats and monkeys, with strange bodies that made their skin crawl. Chen immediately warned the others to stay sharp, telling them that these monsters could dive at their targets in a blink, so even a moment of carelessness could get them seriously hurt. The warning had barely left his mouth when a swarm of ghost monkey bats suddenly dropped from above, cutting through the frozen air as they charged straight toward the group. To everyone's surprise, the boys somehow managed to dodge the lightning-fast attacks, even if their movements were clumsy and desperate rather than clean. For a second, they were thrilled just to realize they had avoided the strike of a D-rank creature. But before they could fully celebrate, an even more unbelievable sight pulled their attention away. Chen stood calmly in the middle of the battlefield, a lightning-wrapped sword held in his hand, while the bodies of dead monsters lay scattered around his feet. Without turning the moment into a big speech, he told his teammates to focus on protecting themselves first because they still were not strong enough, and he would handle everything else. Then another ghost monkey bat suddenly lunged toward them with terrifying speed, forcing the boys to throw themselves aside and barely escape its attack in time. At that moment, Shang Zuo finally understood Chen's purpose. All that brutal reflex and speed training had been preparing them to survive against monsters exactly like this. Shang Zuo clenched his teeth in frustration. He had spent so long calling himself the Dorm King, yet now, when real danger arrived, he had no choice but to depend on his random roommate. While those thoughts raced through his mind, Chen was already moving through the battlefield, wiping out the remaining ghost monkeys one after another. Monsters kept diving at him in waves, but before they could even understand what was happening, his blade flashed through the air and cut them down, the Dorm King muttered under his breath, remembering how Ma Long had always talked about Chen's strength. But hearing about it and witnessing it with his own eyes were completely different things. In that moment, Chen did not look like an ordinary student at all. To the Dorm King, he looked more like someone who had already survived countless real battles. As the fight continued, the Dorm King felt a small sting of jealousy creeping into his chest, especially as Chen's reputation seemed to rise higher with every swing of his sword. Then, without warning, another monster appeared behind the group, and Shang Zuo barely reacted in time, throwing up a block just before its strike could land. He seized the creature's leg with both flaming hands and shouted at his teammates, yelling for them to stop acting like dead weight and finally pull themselves together. After all, Chen was not the only one whose graduation was riding on this test. Every single one of them had something to lose here. The others stared at Shang Zuo in surprise, clearly caught off guard by the sudden fire in his voice and the determination burning in his face. Moved by the Dorm King's stubborn will, Shang Yu finally stepped in and cast his Vine Lock spell, wrapping the monster tightly and managing to bind it in place. But his relief lasted only a split second. The creature tore free almost instantly, then kicked Shang Yu away before he could react. Long quickly followed up with his Frostbite Breeze spell, but the icy attack only slowed the monster a little, forcing the boys to realize that they would need to combine their strength. By working together, they finally managed to hold the creature down for a brief opening, and with everything they had, they shouted for the Dorm King to take the shot. The Dorm King gathered his fire, compressed it into an explosive flame bullet, and fired it straight into the monster with a direct hit. But when the impact faded, the attack had barely harmed it at all, leaving behind only a few scorched hairs, as if the monster had simply shrugged it off. Refusing to stop, he fired several more flame bullets one after another, but no matter how many shots landed, the monster still refused to go down. By then, Shang Yu and Long were already reaching their limits, their bodies straining as they struggled to keep the monster under control. Seeing that they could not hold on much longer, the Dorm King realized he could not afford to save his strength anymore. He poured everything he had into one massive flame attack and launched it straight at the monster, triggering a violent explosion that swallowed the battlefield in fire and smoke. When the smoke finally cleared, all that remained was a charred skeleton. A moment later, the drone announced that they had successfully killed a D-class ghost monkey bat. The three of them collapsed onto the ground, completely drained and gasping for breath. But their faces were filled with excitement because they had actually defeated a D-class monster on their own. Chen walked over with a slightly surprised look, and the moment they saw him, they immediately asked if he had seen them take the monster down. The creature left behind only a single finger bone as loot, and Shang Zuo quickly tried to play it cool, casually claiming that killing it had been nothing more than a piece of cake. Chen did not mock them for it. Instead, he gave them a simple congratulations, acknowledging the victory they had earned with their own strength. Not long after that, the drone's voice rang out again, announcing that every monster inside the Devil's Cave had now been cleared. Back in the viewing area, Director Gong stared at the live feed in utter disbelief, looking like he was about to lose his mind on the spot. He simply could not accept what he had just seen. These students, who were supposedly weak and had no real combat experience, had actually defeated a D-level threat. The rest of the staff had nothing to say. They just sat there in heavy silence, stunned by the result playing out before them. At the same time, Vice Chairman Cavendish's assistant remained composed and calmly praised Chen's performance, calling it truly outstanding. As he watched Chen on the screen, he silently thought that the boy's aura felt strangely familiar, almost reminding him of an old friend from the past. Vice Chairman Cavendish then spoke Chen's name aloud and decided to remember him, and that single decision immediately made President Ting's father and the director uneasy. Trying to shift attention away from Chen as quickly as possible, the director hurriedly directed everyone's focus toward the student council team inside the other D-rank cave. He pointed out that Ting's team had already reached the middle section, and the chairman's aide praised their coordination, saying their teamwork looked almost like that of a professional guild raid team. Chairman Carl smiled after hearing that, clearly pleased, and remarked that this year's graduates were far more impressive than the classes that had come before them. Director Gong lowered his voice and whispered to himself that the real battle was only beginning, and that the most exciting part had not even arrived yet. Inside the D-rank toxic vine cavern, the president's party was suddenly surrounded as poisonous mushroom monsters burst out from every direction, attacking them all at once. In response, a girl stepped forward with her guitar, her fingers moving across the strings as she cast a decay spell through the music. At the same time, a star mage raised his hand and used his attraction ability, pulling the scattered mushroom monsters together into one tight cluster so the team could set up a clean combo attack. The moment the monsters were gathered, he shouted for the captain. Right on cue, the president rushed forward with his sword in hand, ready to end the fight with one decisive strike. In a flash, the president swung his blade and unleashed his blazing sky sword skill, tearing through the grouped-up mushroom monsters and blasting them apart with perfect precision. His teammates quickly realized that the monsters in this school test were exactly the same as the ones they had already fought during training. Because they knew the attack patterns in advance, they handled the battle smoothly without feeling any real pressure. They had already guessed that the school officials had prepared this test with their team in mind. With the right support quietly arranged behind them, everything naturally became much easier. Thinking about that advantage, they started celebrating before the fight was even truly over, completely confident that first place this year would belong to them without any serious challenge. Meanwhile, down on the final level of the Cloud Forest, the boys could barely believe they had made it this far. They had actually survived long enough to reach the boss monster. In the middle of a frozen wasteland, they spotted a massive ghost ape crouched in the snow, calmly eating its meal as if it had been waiting there the whole time. The dorm king immediately broke into a cold sweat just by looking at it. The monster's presence alone was enough to make him feel that one clean hit from that beast could kill him on the spot. Then, as if sensing fear, the creature slowly lifted its gaze and locked its eyes directly onto the weakest person in the group. Ma Long screamed in terror, and that single panicked shout was all it took to provoke the beast into moving. The giant ape suddenly launched itself toward them, its huge body cutting through the air in a terrifying leap. The boys instantly scattered and ran with everything they had, desperate to put distance between themselves and the monster before it could crush them. Chen, however, did the complete opposite. Without even a second of hesitation, he charged straight toward the beast. He leapt right into the giant ape's face and slammed it with a brutal kick, then followed up with a rapid storm of punches that knocked its heavy body into the air again and again. And before the monster could recover, Chen finished the battle in the most savage way possible, ripping the creature apart until its body was torn into pieces. Watching that brutal fight unfold right in front of them left his friends completely frozen in shock, unable to process what they had just witnessed. Even after crushing the monster, Chen did not look satisfied. Instead, he felt annoyed that these D-rank monsters were not giving him nearly enough experience points. The drops were not much better either, and the rewards left him feeling just as disappointed as the experience gain. Just then, he heard his teammates suddenly shouting with excitement, calling out that they had found giant mana stones. It turned out that the giant ape had been hiding the glowing stones inside a hollow tree trunk, tucked away like a secret treasure. His friends stared at the sparkling crystals in amazement and immediately reached out, unable to resist grabbing the unexpected loot. Chen instantly shouted for them to stop, but his warning came just a second too late. A blinding flash of light exploded out from the hollow trunk. In only a few seconds, the freezing blast spread across the entire area, sealing everything around them under a thick layer of solid ice. Chen, Xiangyu, Xiangzuo, the dorm king, and even the camera drones were completely trapped by the cold frozen stiff before they could react. Up in the VIP room, the live video feed suddenly flickered and cut out, leaving the screen dead in front of everyone. The shady director's mouth curled into a faint smile, as if this was exactly what he had been waiting for. He knew high-rank monsters often used traps, and he had expected Chen's rookie team to walk straight into one sooner or later. Vice Chairman Cavendish frowned as concern showed on his face, clearly worried about the students inside. The director immediately pretended to be regretful about Chen's failure, and said they had no choice but to pull the team out right away. But the principal did not agree with that decision. He pointed out that the students were not in true danger yet, because their wristbands would activate automatically if their health dropped too low, and none of the team members had chosen to surrender. In his eyes, the decision to quit should belong to the students themselves, not to the adults watching from outside. Back down in the dungeon, Ma Long was trembling in the freezing cold, his breath shaking as frost filled the air around him. Out of the entire group, he was the only one who had somehow avoided being completely frozen. The reason was his character class, which naturally gave him strong resistance against ice magic and allowed him to survive the trap when everyone else was caught. And Ma Long heard a chilling laugh echo through the frozen space, and when he looked up, he saw a skeleton ice monster staring at him with merciless eyes. He recognized it almost immediately as the Lord of the Lair, remembering the creature from the Monster Compendium. From what he recalled, it was a cloud mage, a terrifying monster capable of controlling both offense and defense by manipulating ice and snow with ease. He also remembered its name, the Bone King of Remains, a creature known for enjoying the slow torture of its prey before finally killing them. The moment Ma Long understood that the ice bomb had only been a trap, he turned and ran without hesitation. He knew far too well that he could never defeat a C-class Lord monster by himself. He rushed toward Chen, trying to free him from the ice, but before he could reach his friend, an ice attack shot forward and pierced straight through his leg. Bone King laughed cruelly at his suffering, while Ma Long's bracelet immediately sent out a warning that his leg had been completely pierced. The device offered him the chance to abandon the exam, but even through the pain, Ma Long refused to give up. Instead, he kept trying to thaw Chen out, knowing that if they lost their strongest fighter, their only real advantage would disappear. But before he could finish freeing Chen, another ice shard suddenly shot through the air and stabbed into his arm, stopping his desperate attempt. Bone King seemed to take pleasure in watching Ma Long suffer through the unbearable pain, while his bracelet issued another urgent warning about severe damage. It detected that his arm had also been pierced, and that his heart rate had climbed to a dangerous level, once again offering him the option to quit the exam. But instead of surrendering, Ma Long's mind drifted back to his past. All his life, whenever things became difficult, he had chosen to run away, and every time he did, he ended up falling further behind everyone else. He remembered being ignored, bullied, and laughed at by others. He and his friends had fought far too hard to reach this moment, and quitting now would make everything they endured meaningless. Seeing this as his final chance to change his fate, Ma Long forced strength back into his shaking body, stood up through the pain, and finally managed to free Chen from the ice. He plants his feet and stands tall without backing down, even as the Bone King unleashes a merciless storm of icicles, each frozen spike tearing through the air straight toward him. Just when the attack is about to crash into him, Long forces out a thunderous roar, and at that very moment, Chen's closed eyes finally snap open. The thick block of ice around him bursts apart in a spray of frozen fragments, and Chen immediately dashes forward, scooping Long away from the danger zone in one smooth, lightning-fast move. That sudden escape happens so quickly that even the Bone King is caught completely off guard, its attack missing the mark before it can react. Long stares at Chen in disbelief and quickly realizes that Chen didn't rely on anyone else at all. He had shattered that icy prison through his own strength. Chen looks at Long and thanks him for trying to help earlier, but his expression immediately turns serious as he asks about Long's wounds with genuine concern in his voice. Long steadies his breathing and tells him the bleeding has stopped for the moment, so he should be able to hang on. Then he quickly warns Chen that the monster in front of them is a cloud-type C-rank lord called the Bone King, and in close combat, it is unbelievably dangerous. If they get frozen again, he says, there may not be a second chance. The two of them turn their attention back toward the battlefield, only to see the Bone King gathering an enormous cluster of ice shards above itself. Long's face tightens in shock as he realizes what is coming. The monster is preparing to drop something far worse than ordinary ice magic. It is basically an enormous frozen bomb aimed right at them. In the very next instant, the massive ice bomb slams down, and the entire area is swallowed by a blinding explosion of white frost and flying shards. The monster starts laughing as if victory is already guaranteed. But its laughter cuts off sharply when it sees that both boys are still standing alive after that devastating attack. Chen has already switched his class to the Doomflame King and activated his Cloud Warrior Frost Body, making him completely immune to cold damage. In this frozen battlefield, the transformation also pushes all of his resistance stats even higher, turning the Bone King's icy territory into an advantage for Chen instead. Bone King recoils and lets out a terrified shriek, its confidence collapsing the moment it realizes its ice can no longer hurt him. Even Long freezes in confusion, staring at his friend in disbelief. Chen was supposed to be a Volt Assassin, yet now he is standing there with the presence of a Cloud-type warrior. For a second, Long can only wonder if Chen is one of those unbelievably rare prodigies who awakened two different classes at the same time. Chen, however, does not brag or explain himself. He simply apologizes for misreading the situation earlier, admitting that because of his mistake, he dragged his friends into a fight far more dangerous than he expected. Then, without hesitation, Chen changes classes once again, and this time his body shifts into the terrifying form of an abyssal fiend. He draws out his Purgatory Warrior sword and faces the Bone King head-on, his stance making it clear that he plans to finish the battle right here. Long's jaw drops wide open as he watches the transformation happen right in front of him, completely unable to process what he is seeing. For most Awakeners, being born with one class is already the foundation of their entire path, and they spend their lives specializing in that single power. Only in extremely rare cases can someone possess two classes at once. People with dual classes are so rare that they can practically be counted on one hand, which is why every major guild treats them like priceless treasures they would do anything to recruit. But that alone is not what leaves Long completely shaken. As he looks more carefully, he realizes Chen is not switching between one or even two classes. He is using three completely different classes. And what makes it even more unbelievable is that every single one of those classes is extraordinary. In his Abyssal Fiend form, Chen's stats surge upward at a terrifying speed. His raw physical strength explodes beneath him, launching his body off the ground with the force of a rocket. Chen charges straight toward the boss with unstoppable momentum, closing the distance in a violent burst of speed. The Bone King's smug grin disappears in an instant as it senses the deadly aura pouring from Chen's body. With one clean swing, Chen slices through the bony monster as easily as a blade cutting through soft butter. The kill immediately pushes him up to level 17, and at the same time a rare loot drop appears as his reward. Long stares at the shattered skeleton lying across the ground, still frozen in complete disbelief that Chen has just wiped out a C-rank boss with a single strike. Chen, acting almost too casually after everything that just happened, reminds him that the rest of their team is still trapped solid inside the ice. Ma Long jolts in panic as he realizes he had completely forgotten about the others during the chaos of the boss fight. Without wasting another second, he sprints off to thaw them out before the cold can kill them. Once Ma Long is gone, Chen glances back at the fallen boss and notices that he now has the option to devour the defeated Frostlet King. With no one nearby to witness it, Chen quickly absorbs the fallen boss's power and unlocks a brand new class, Cloud Mage. And because the boss's earlier ice attack had blinded every camera and drone in the area, no one watching from outside will discover his hidden ability either. Then, just when he thinks the surprises are over, another unexpected notification suddenly appears in front of him. His Lightning Assassin class has leveled up as well, giving him the chance to add a star and strengthen one of his stats. Meanwhile, over in the D-rank zone, known as Gloomvine Grotto, the Council President's team is being pushed to the brink and completely overwhelmed. No matter how hard they attack or how desperately they pour on their skills, the D-rank boss proves far too powerful for these inexperienced amateur awakeners. The mage trying to restrain the monster with magical chains is already trembling under the pressure, looking like he might collapse at any moment. To make things worse, the lightning archer's arrows barely seem to bother the boss at all, landing with so little effect that they feel more like a light massage than real damage. The beast swats and throws them around with ease, tossing their bodies aside like cheap action figures. The sheer humiliation hits them hard, making them wonder whether all their combat lessons, training drills, and simulations had been completely useless from the start. They have never stood before anything even close to this level of power. Seeing the situation falling apart, the mage quickly understands that the president is their only real hope of turning the fight around. Far behind the front line, the president stands with confidence, striking a dramatic pose as if the entire battle has been waiting for his moment. He begins charging his ultimate skill, while the support mages behind him pour layer after layer of buffs into his body to amplify his power. Once he finally gathers enough energy, the president launches himself toward the boss, his flaming sword blazing brightly in his hands. The fiery blade drives straight through the monster's core, piercing the very center of its body. A moment later, flames erupt from within the creature like a raging storm, burning and melting it apart from the inside out. His teammates burst into wild cheers, celebrating as if they have just witnessed the birth of a legend whose name will surely be recorded in history. A nearby drone hovers in place and announces the result for everyone to hear, confirming that their team has successfully cleared a grade D zone in just a little over 30 minutes. Their whole party is instantly fired up, their faces glowing with excitement as they become completely convinced that first place is already theirs. In their minds, there is no way any other team could have possibly finished faster than that. With that confidence burning in their chests, they eagerly make their way out of the lair, fully expecting to see their names shining proudly at the very top of the rankings. But as they move through the hallways outside, they pass row after row of students who had given up halfway through and teleported out before finishing their zones. Most of those students look completely shaken, their faces pale and their bodies still stiff with fear, as if the demons they faced for the first time are still haunting them. That is when the president's lackey notices Chen and his squad sitting off to the side, away from all the noise and movement. He only needs one look at their tired faces and worn-out bodies before he thinks he understands exactly what happened. In his mind, it is obvious that Chen's team must have failed almost immediately after entering the lair. Wearing a smug grin, the lackey strolls over and starts mocking Chen, laughing at him for supposedly collapsing halfway through after acting so bold earlier. The loyal follower keeps running his mouth, but before he can enjoy himself any longer, his boss sharply shuts him up because the Alliance vice-chairman is approaching. The elegant man walks forward with an air of authority, clapping slowly as he congratulates the students on what he calls an excellent performance. As he draws closer, the president keeps his expression calm and controlled, while the followers around him can barely contain their excitement at standing before one of the most powerful men in the world. President Ting steps forward with confidence and smoothly reaches out his hand, clearly expecting a respectful handshake. But Mr. Cavendish does not even glance at him. He walks straight past the outstretched hand as if President Ting is not there at all. Being ignored so openly in front of everyone makes the president's pride crack on the spot, and the humiliation lands harder than any monster's attack. And before he can recover from that embarrassment, the vice-chairman makes it even worse by loudly calling his rival a true legend. Mr. Cavendish grips Chen's shoulder in front of the crowd and announces that Chen cleared a D-rank dungeon in only 20 minutes. He even says that not a single professional team from his own guild has ever shattered a record like that. The council president and all of his lackeys are left frozen in place. their smug expressions wiped clean as they struggle to say even a single word. They cannot understand how 4 unknown students could beat the time of their 10-man squad and somehow manage to clear an entire D-rank lair for real. Chen, however, barely reacts at all. Praise from the strongest man in the country does not shake him in the slightest, though he does quietly wonder why someone this important came to the academy in person. Carl Cavendish looks at him calmly and says that he will remember Chen's name very well from this day forward. After that, he turns his attention toward Gong Lin, the man who had invited him here in the first place. Vice Chairman casually adds that Gong Lin's son is talented too, but the compliment is so mild that it feels more like politeness than real praise. Those words leave both father and son with a bitter feeling, especially after seeing how warmly Chen was acknowledged right in front of them. With that brief comment finished, the vice chairman announces that it is time for him to leave. Before the atmosphere can turn any more awkward, the academy director quickly steps forward to smooth everything over. He announces the final results and explains that the 2 top teams have ended with the same score. Because of that tie, every member of both teams will receive an official invitation to join the Imperial Guild. To Chen's roommates, this news sounds like the sweetest music imaginable, because thanks to Chen carrying the team, their futures are basically secured. President Ting's lackeys start celebrating as well. But Ting himself stands there with a dark expression, clearly nowhere near satisfied with this outcome. The director then adds one more reward. The team captains will receive management positions in the guild for their leadership, and the $1 million cash prize will be divided evenly between them. The moment they hear that, both team leaders are visibly caught off guard, their expressions changing at the unexpected decision. Chen quietly calculates the situation and realizes that $500,000 still will not be enough to clear his debt. He has to find another way to earn the remaining money and keep his promise to the Mithril Exchange Guild. But before that worry can fully settle in, President Ting steps forward and openly refuses to accept the result as a tie. He declares in front of everyone that a one-on-one duel should decide the true winner, because in his eyes, there can only be one champion. The sudden challenge shocks the crowd so much that even the academy director and the vice chairman turn their attention toward him. Alarmed by his nephew's reckless move, the director quickly tries to talk him down, urging him to accept the tie. After the humiliation from earlier, the older man knows this shared victory is already the best possible result. The director assumes Chen will see the duel as pointless and reject it outright. But Chen immediately accepts the challenge with one condition. Whoever wins the duel takes the entire $1 million prize. That unexpected twist is interesting enough to make the vice chairman stop in his tracks, canceling his departure for the moment. With the terms now set, Chen steps forward and faces his opponent directly, ready to settle everything once and for all. Sometime later, Qingju tells Si Chen that he had expected him to take first place. But even he never imagined Si Chen would manage to earn a perfect score. After seeing Si Chen's name spread across the news, Qingju feels even more certain that supporting him financially was the right decision. He offers to wipe away Si Chen's $1.5 million debt completely, calling it an angel investment in his future. But Si Chen refuses to accept it as a handout. His tone is firm as he says that a debt is still a debt, and if he owes the money, then he will repay every bit of it. Si Chen then says that he came here to discuss 2 matters, and that immediately draws Qingju's full attention. For the first matter, Si Chen asks for a 1-week extension on the repayment deadline. Since the graduation test ended in a tie, the prize money he received was still short by $500,000. He then reveals how he plans to get the rest of the funds, a one-on-one tiebreaker against the other champion, Gong Ting. The duel is set for next week, inside a wild devil's cave outside the school. Qingju is stunned the moment he hears that plan, unable to understand why 2 students would willingly enter a wild dungeon just to settle a competition. He warns Si Chen that going into a place like that without professional training is far too dangerous. But Si Chen remains completely calm, telling him not to worry and promising that he will win the remaining $500,000. To make up for asking for the extension, Si Chen also promises to hand over all the monster materials he collects from the cave as interest. Seeing Si Chen speak with no fear at all, focused only on paying back what he owes, Qingju breaks into a nervous sweat. Deep down, he has to admit that this young man really is something special. Si Chen leans back casually, a faint smile tugging at his lips, and mentions that there's actually a second, even more important reason for his visit today. His expression shifts to serious, the light in his eyes sharpening as he bluntly delivers the final piece of news he has come to share. The revelation hits Qingju like a thunderclap, leaving him completely stunned, his mouth hanging open as disbelief washes over him. For a long, silent moment, Qingju can do nothing but stand frozen in place, staring at Si Chen with a mixture of shock and awe, unable to utter a single word. Later that afternoon at Kingshui Middle School, Si Chen's younger sister, Si Yun, finally breathes out in relief, celebrating the end of her grueling final exams, while her classmates grumble and complain about the test's difficulty. She checks her phone, her face lighting up with a bright smile, as she notes the official start of her summer vacation. Suddenly, a thought strikes her. Today isn't just about her own freedom, it's also a big day for her brother, with his graduation assessment taking place. Her gaze drifts to her phone's lock screen, where a cheerful selfie of her and Sai Chen grins back at her, reminding her of their shared memories and dreams. 4 years earlier, an overjoyed Si Chen had burst into the room, waving his admission letter from the National Awakener University, his eyes sparkling with excitement at the potential he now knew he possessed. A younger Cici Yun had bounced on her toes, eagerly asking if her brother was going to become an awakener, just like their parents. Overflowing with hope, Si Chen had promised her that he would join a top guild, earn enough to give her a better life, and make their dreams a reality. He had also believed that gaining power and knowledge would eventually lead him to uncover the truth behind their parents' mysterious disappearance. Cici Yun had cheered him on wholeheartedly, fully confident that her brother would rise to become a strong and capable awakener. In a more recent memory, a somber Sai Chen had sat alone at his desk, troubled by the thought that he was already a senior and still hadn't awakened his powers, while Sai Yun quietly watched from the side. Noticing the worry etched on her face, he quickly tried to mask his own disappointment, not wanting to burden her with his frustration. Forcing a gentle smile, he reassured her that everything was fine, insisting that he just needed to work even harder to reach his goals. Cici Yun reflects on the long and difficult journey her brother has endured. Despite pouring more effort into his studies than anyone else, he remained the only student who hadn't yet awakened. She realizes how lonely he must have felt, watching his peers succeed while he hid his pain, all in an effort to shield her from worry. Suddenly, her classmate Ju Tong rushes up, calling her name and catching her attention with a bright smile. Ju Tong excitedly asks if Cici Yun has heard the latest news, her eyes sparkling with curiosity. She explains that the National Awakener University has produced 2 genius graduates this year, a rare and impressive feat. Ju Tong continues, detailing that both graduates led their respective teams to perfect scores and earned praise from the vice chairman of the Guild Alliance, catapulting their county into sudden fame. Ju Tong then remembers that Cici Yun's brother studies at that very university and asks about him, prompting a flicker of sadness in her expression as she hesitates. Before she can answer, a pink-haired student interrupts with a playful, flirty greeting. It's the school idol, Jin Duoxin, who smugly informs her that he's booked a private room and asks if she's free to join him tonight. Ju Tong is flabbergasted, demanding to know since when Cici Yun even knew the school idol. Cici Yun, however, only scowls, clearly annoyed by the interruption. Without uttering a single word to him, Cici Yun spins on her heel and bolts down the hallway, her determination and annoyance driving her steps. Ju Tong watches in confusion, wondering why her friend is suddenly sprinting away, while Jin Duoxin lingers, bemused as he watches her disappear from sight. As she races home, Cici Yun imagines her brother sitting alone, crushed by failure, while his classmates around him celebrate their success, leaving him in despair. Determined to lift his spirits, she decides to prepare a lavish feast, something grand enough to remind him that he is not alone and to cheer him up. Later that night, inside their cozy apartment, Cici Yun busies herself in the kitchen, arranging a sprawling, delicious spread complete with a steaming hot pot and an array of carefully prepared side dishes. Si Chen's eyes widen in amazement at the sheer quantity and quality of the food, and he asks his sister in disbelief how she managed to prepare so much so quickly. As he digs in, savoring each bite, Cici Yun watches silently from the side, her heart full of concern yet softened by his visible enjoyment. On the television, a news report begins covering the graduation test at the National Awakener University, adding a layer of tension to the otherwise joyful meal. Sai Chen continues eating with casual delight, paying attention to the report detailing Vice Chairman Carl's visit and the rare accolades given during the graduation assessment. Watching him act so cheerful, Cici Yun assumes he must be masking disappointment, pretending to be happy despite his earlier struggles. The broadcast moves on to a rare event, 2 students achieving perfect scores simultaneously, an occurrence so extraordinary that it makes headlines. The news highlights the vice chairman's personal praise for one of the team leaders who achieved the perfect score, announcing the name, Si Chen. Hearing her brother's name, Cici Yun freezes, her eyes widening as she stares at the television in utter shock. She cannot believe the news. The brother she had thought failed is in fact the brilliant genius who scored perfectly on the graduation assessment. Meanwhile, in a shadowed room, a bloody whip lies discarded on the floor, and a cold, calculating voice declares that the stage has been set. The speaker is Gong Lin. Standing over his battered son, Gong Ting, holding the whip in his hand, he shouts at his son, declaring that a special audience had been invited to witness his victory. He berates Gong Ting for ruining the performance his meticulous plan had been designed to showcase. Bloodied and gasping for air, Gong Ting struggles to respond as his father angrily reminds him that he had embarrassingly tied with a nobody. Gong Lin coldly asserts that Gong Ting will no longer make any decisions for himself, revealing that he has already seized control and rigged the upcoming tiebreaker to guarantee victory. Gong Ting hangs his head in defeat, knowing there's nothing he can do as his father coldly declares he will handle the situation personally. Obsessed with ensuring the Gong family secures first place, Gong Lin vows to claim the victory by any means necessary, letting nothing stand in his way. Meanwhile, at home, hearing the shocking news on television, Sai Yun turns to her brother with wide eyes and asks if the Sai Chen being mentioned is truly him. Si Chen calmly continues his dinner, his expression relaxed, and confirms that the report is indeed about him. Stunned by the confirmation, Si Yun drops her spoon in shock. It shatters on the floor, and a flash of lightning outside mirrors the sudden jolt of her emotions. She stares at him, completely unable to comprehend it, realizing that her own brother has accomplished such an extraordinary feat during his graduation assessment. She can hardly wrap her head around it. Her brother didn't just lead his team to a perfect score, he even received personal praise from the vice chairman of the Guild Alliance himself. For a moment, the whole dinner table falls into a stunned silence, with only the faint sound of the television continuing in the background. Overwhelmed by everything she has just heard, Si Yun lowers her head and quietly wipes at the tears gathering in her eyes, thinking of him as her silly, stubborn brother. Then, through tears filled with joy and pride, she looks back up at Si Chen and smiles, finally realizing that after all those painful years, her brother has truly reached the top. On the night of the graduation combat assessment, June 17, 2057, Vice Chairman Carl Cavendish sits inside a private dining room, calmly enjoying a plate of premium beef as if the chaos outside has nothing to do with him. While cutting into his meal and savoring the taste, he casually asks the woman across from him to report the latest progress on her current assignment. Sitting opposite him at the table is Ling Yu, her posture composed and her expression serious as she prepares to deliver her findings. Without wasting any time, she slides a black folder across the table, filled with top-secret files connected to a mysterious subject known as the devourer. Ling Yu explains that over the past year, the target has left behind no trace at all, and she warns Carl that if they keep pushing their surveillance too far, they may end up being discovered first. Carl, however, does not seem troubled in the slightest. He simply praises her for the work she has done and tells her to sit down and eat before continuing. Ling Yu hesitates for a brief moment, then says there is still one more piece of information she needs to tell him. She reveals that she recently noticed a highly suspicious individual who had made contact with Carl, and the moment those words leave her mouth, his attention sharpens. According to Ling Yu, the speed at which this person's power has been increasing is far beyond normal, so abnormal that it is impossible to ignore. Meanwhile, inside the Devil Tower, a shirtless Si Chen stands surrounded by crackling golden electricity, reflecting on the fact that he has spent more than half a month on the first floor and has already wiped out almost every monster there. By now, he has completely adapted to the crushing 10 times gravity of the floor, and his system interface displays his Lightning Assassin class at level 17, along with stats that have been boosted to an impressive degree. After the graduation battle, his Lightning Assassin class reached full proficiency and rewarded him with an attribute point, proving that the more actively he uses a class in battle, the faster that class can grow. As the glowing avatars of his 4 different classes appear around him, Si Chen understands that none of them have reached their maximum potential yet. He decides to place his new attribute point into speed, since for an assassin, speed is the most important weapon of all. With the multiplier effect taking hold, his speed skyrockets to 740, putting him on the same level as an A-rank assassin. Even after gaining that huge boost, Si Chen still finds himself locked in a tense standoff against a pack of glowing purple phantom lionesses. The real problem is the floor's lord itself, a massive phantom lion king that has stayed just out of reach, impossible for him to land a clean hit on. When 2 lionesses suddenly lunge at him from different angles, Si Chen activates Divine Flash, turning his body into a streak of golden lightning as he rushes forward to meet them head-on. As the battle continues, Sai Chen begins to notice the strange abilities hidden within the Lion King's movements. Every time he spots an opening and moves in to strike, the creature disappears at the last possible second, vanishing before his attack can connect. Si Chen watches the pack carefully, studying the way each beast moves and how they coordinate their attacks around him. Their positions shift constantly at high speed, but the pattern stays the same. 2 lionesses always pressure him up close, while the other 2 remain on standby. At the same time, the Lion King keeps itself at a safe distance, refusing to enter the range where Si Chen can directly engage it. Si Chen narrows his eyes, frustration building as he realizes the floor's lord has no intention of fighting him head-on. Staring down the enormous beast from across the battlefield, Si Chen wonders what kind of combat class this evasive Lion King could possibly have. When another phantom lioness charges straight at him, Si Chen counters instantly, driving a powerful bolt of lightning directly into the creature's open mouth. But just as he is about to finish it off with a fatal strike, the lioness vanishes in a flash of pink light, leaving his attack to cut through empty air. That moment makes him realize the teleportation ability is not limited to the floor's lord. Even the lionesses can disappear the instant he tries to land the finishing blow. A spatial portal opens nearby, and the targeted lioness safely reappears beside the Lion King, as if it had never been in danger at all. Now the pack's strategy becomes painfully clear. The second Sai-Chen hesitates or slows down, another lioness lunges forward to bait out his next attack. Determined to shatter their coordination, Sai-Chen gathers golden lightning around his body and unleashes a rapid storm of slashes. But no matter how fast his blades move, the beasts keep disappearing just before the strikes can land. Pack maintains its formation perfectly, teleporting back to the Lion King whenever any of them are pushed into real danger. The lionesses continue pressing him from every side, forcing Sai-Chen to block their glowing claws again and again. Each time Sai-Chen swings back and tries to punish them, the result is exactly the same. The lionesses vanish before they can take any real damage. Through the portals, they rotate attackers with flawless timing, making sure a fresh beast is always the one rushing in to keep him under pressure. Sai-Chen keeps striking at the lunging beasts, but the cycle refuses to break, with each target disappearing at the exact moment his attacks are about to hit. The lionesses continue this endless loop of assaults, dragging him into a draining fight where every exchange wastes more of his energy. Sweat beads across Sai-Chen's face as he glares toward the Lion King, finally realizing the floor's lord is deliberately stretching out the battle and toying with him. As he leaps into the air to dodge another beast's attack, a thought cuts through his frustration. Why is he stubbornly trying to defeat teleporting enemies using speed alone? Changing his approach, Sai-Chen opens his system interface and initiates a class switch, cold blue energy surging around his body. As frost begins forming over him like a layer of armor, he reasons that if the Lion King refuses direct combat, then he has no reason to keep relying on a close combat class. The transformation turns his hair pure white and lights his eyes with an icy blue glow as Sai-Chen decides to use his mage class to shut down the beast's evasive tactics completely. The system confirms the switch, marking his new form as the level 17 Cloud Mage class, Frostbone Skeleton King. Now standing tall beneath an icy crown, Sai-Chen prepares to take control of the entire battlefield with wide-range spells instead of chasing the beasts one by one. Floating high above the battlefield in his level 17 Cloud Mage form, Frostbone Skeleton King, Sai-Chen raises his power and unleashes a wide-scale spell known as Frost Spike. A brutal storm of ice spikes comes crashing down from above, hammering the ground again and again. Each impact erupts into a violent blast of frost and shattered debris, forcing the phantom lionesses to break formation, scatter in every direction, and retreat from the freezing explosions. High above the chaos, Sai-Chen watches the battlefield with a calm, calculating gaze. He understands now that even if mages are vulnerable once an enemy gets too close, their ability to strike from far away lets them seize control of the entire battlefield before their opponents can even reach them. Without giving the Lion King a moment to breathe, Sai-Chen fixes his attention on the beast and gathers his power again. A dense curtain of ice spikes forms overhead, then comes raining straight down toward the Lion King in a focused, merciless attack. Right before the deadly shower of ice can tear into it, the Lion King reacts instantly. Its spatial power flares, and in the blink of an eye, the massive beast vanishes from the spot where it had been standing. A portal opens at a safer distance, and the Lion King steps out from within it, completely avoiding the strike. The ice crashes down where it had been moments earlier, but the beast has already slipped away without taking the hit. The Lion King quickly rejoins the remaining lionesses, trying to recover its formation. But before the pack can launch another attack, a huge, swirling vortex of icy energy rises around them, wrapping the entire group inside a freezing trap. Sai-Chen's eyes remain cold as he realizes his plan has worked. By driving the beast directly into his chosen kill zone, he has cut off their annoying hit-and-run strategy and forced the entire pack into one place. The Lion King suddenly senses a terrifying pressure descending from above. Panic flashes through its eyes as it looks up and sees Sai-Chen forming a massive sphere of freezing energy, a deadly frost blast bomb swelling in the air. Sai-Chen stares down at them without the slightest trace of mercy and coldly tells them there is nowhere left to hide. Trapped beneath him, the shocked Lion King can only throw back its head and release a desperate, furious roar. With one decisive motion, Sai-Chen hurls the enormous ice bomb straight down. The moment it slams into the ground, it detonates with overwhelming force, swallowing the entire area in a blinding white flash and a violent wave of freezing energy. When the glare finally fades, the terrifying power of the spell is revealed. The Lion King and its entire pack are frozen solid, sealed inside towering, jagged pillars of ice that rise from the battlefield like frozen graves. With every target completely immobilized, Sai-Chen wastes no time. He rapidly switches classes, and a glowing pink sword materializes in his hand, its light cutting sharply through the cold air. A blue glow shines from Sai-Chen's eyes as he grips the sword with absolute confidence. Looking down at the frozen enemies before him, he declares that the battle on the first floor of the Dread Spire has finally reached its end. Now, using the power of his Stellar Warrior class, Si Chen launches himself toward the trapped beasts. He raises his weapon high, then brings it down with a crushing attack known as Triple Cataclysm. The glowing energy blade tears through the frozen lionesses with terrifying ease. Their icy prisons shatter apart under the strike, and in one sweeping blow, Si Chen cuts down the trapped beasts before they can resist. One by one, the defeated monsters break apart and dissolve into dark mist. When the last traces fade, Si Chen remains standing beside the fallen Lion King, victorious and completely in control of the battlefield. The system immediately confirms his victory. His alias, Ash C, rises to level 24, and his rewards appear as well, including several phantomane bones and a rare heart taken from the defeated boss. A new system prompt appears above the Lion King's defeated body. The message makes it clear that the boss monster is now ready to be devoured. Si Chen stands over the dead beast and lifts his hand, gathering a bright glow in his palm. With the light growing stronger, he begins the absorption process without hesitation. His eyes shift to a fierce red glow as he focuses his energy on the corpse below him. What he really wants to uncover is the evasive class this monster used to keep escaping him throughout the fight. Si Chen activates his absorber ability, and dark red energy begins spiraling out of the fallen beast. The swirling force twists like a vortex before being drawn directly into his clenched fist. That gathered energy condenses into a new system card in his palm, revealing the Lion King's class, Stellar Tamer. The card lays out the troublesome nature of its abilities, from forcing contracts onto other beasts to instantly teleporting them across the battlefield. Si Chen studies the Stellar Tamer card carefully, his expression sharpening with interest. Even after everything he has seen, this is a type of class he has never encountered before. The moment he understands what the card is showing him, the Lion King's fighting style finally makes sense. This was exactly why the boss kept avoiding direct confrontation. Si Chen pieces it together and realizes the Lion King's own base stats must have been far too weak for a head-on battle. That weakness forced it to rely on its teleporting minions and hide behind them instead. As he reads through the listed skills, Si Chen has to admit that Stellar Warp is an incredibly powerful teleportation ability. Used properly, it can completely reshape the flow of a battle. The Stellar Pact ability also catches his attention, though it is clearly different in nature. Its strength depends heavily on terrifying the target so completely that the beast is forced to submit. Si Chen quickly understands what that means for him. If he wants to gain a contracted beast of his own, he will need to take an aggressive, overwhelming approach and frighten the target into obedience. Just then, the starry void surrounding him suddenly fractures like glass. A blinding burst of light floods his vision, catching him off guard as the entire space around him begins to change. The illusion shatters completely, and the true first floor of the Dread Spire is finally revealed. Instead of a starry battlefield, Si Chen finds himself standing in a vast, scorching desert filled with endless rolling dunes. He looks across the barren wasteland, taking in the giant skeletons scattered across the sand. The sheer scale of the destruction makes him wonder what kind of disaster could have left this place in such a ruined state. A sharp crackling sound suddenly breaks the silence, pulling Si Chen's attention toward a nearby dune. There, a vertical rift tears open in the air and expands into a fiery portal. Its blazing light makes it clear that the gateway to the second floor has officially opened. Just as Si Chen is about to move forward, he feels a hostile stare burning into his back. A low growl rises from the shadows behind him, making him turn around immediately. His gaze follows the glow of a pair of pink eyes until he spots their source, a large ribcage half buried beneath the sand. Inside the skeletal remains, a fluffy little lion cub is hiding. Even though magical chains are wrapped tightly around its body, the tiny creature still bares its teeth and growls fiercely at him. Si Chen is genuinely caught off guard. After the destruction he just caused, he never expected that one small lion would somehow manage to survive the battle. At first he assumes the cub must be the last enemy left behind. A lightning dagger crackles into shape in his hand as he prepares to finish the job and remove the final threat. But as Si Chen steps closer to the hiding cub, he notices something important. Since the cub did not disappear when the Lion King died, it could not have been one of the boss's contracted minions. He looks more carefully at the magical chains digging tightly around the little creature. The sight makes him wonder whether the Lion King had actually kept this cub imprisoned here against its will. Si Chen stands over the bound cub and fixes it with a harsh, intimidating glare. The tiny lion stiffens under his gaze, completely terrified by the pressure coming from him. But instead of striking the cub, Si Chen moves his dagger in a swift arc. The blade cuts through the magical restraints, shattering the chains that had been holding the little creature captive. With the bindings destroyed, the small lion drops free from the ribcage and lands safely on the sand below. Si Chen turns away from it without making another move to attack. In a calm voice, he tells the cub that he is simply giving its freedom back. As he gets ready to leave, Si Chen glances back and asks the cub whether this ruined, desolate place used to be its home. The tiny lion shakes the dust from its fur, then keeps watching him closely, still alert but no longer trapped by the chains. A softer look crosses Si Chen's face as he thinks about what the cub must have lost. Watching the people you love die and seeing everything precious to you destroyed is a pain that leaves a wound deeper than words. The cub continues staring at him in silence as Sai-Chen admits, with a quiet heaviness in his voice, that he knows exactly what that kind of suffering feels like. Si-Chen then walks toward the fiery portal, leaving the cub behind with one final piece of advice. He tells it to survive, to keep moving forward, and then announces that it is time for him to head to the next floor. But before he can fully leave, a glowing system interface suddenly appears beside his face. On the screen is a new beast contract request. Because the beast approached him of its own free will, the contract's success was guaranteed. Not only that, but two passive abilities immediately unlocked. One allowed experience gain to be shared, boosting its stats, while the other let Si-Chen peer through the beast's eyes if it ever found itself in danger. Si-Chen paused in his steps, glancing back in genuine surprise at the unexpected prompt flashing before him, his eyebrows raised at this sudden turn. There, sitting on the warm sand, the little white cub looked up at him with clear, unwavering eyes. The system identified it as Lion King Leo and displayed a request. Would Si-Chen accept the creature as his contracted beast? He studied the tiny lion carefully, seeing the determination in its gaze. Si-Chen asked, voice calm but probing, if it truly wished to accompany him on this journey. The cub responded immediately, letting out a fierce, resolute roar that left no doubt about its decision. Standing before the blazing portal, Si-Chen outlined his plan to ascend the dread spire, warning the cub that each floor would hold monsters growing increasingly more dangerous with every step. He took a moment to stress the stakes. The cub could die if it wasn't careful. Are you sure? He asked, seeking final confirmation before moving forward. Leo answered with another loud, defiant roar, its tiny body brimming with courage despite the odds. Satisfied by the cub's determination, Si-Chen nodded, accepting its decision with quiet approval. A radiant pink pentagram flared in both their eyes, glowing brightly as the bond began to take hold. The system's voice confirmed the pact. The contract was officially established, binding Si-Chen and Leo together. A detailed display appeared, revealing Leo's Stellar Tamer class and the Stellar Pact ability, which allowed forced contracts through intimidation, but warned that the beast would perish if its master died. Both passive skills activated immediately, one boosting the cub's stats while sharing experience, the other granting Si-Chen access to the beast's vision whenever it faced danger. Finally, the Stellar Warp ability unlocked, giving Si-Chen the power to teleport directly to the cub or summon it wherever he needed. With their bond now formalized, Si-Chen smiled, a sense of calm determination washing over him. The energetic little cub bounded happily at his side, eager to follow wherever he led. Approaching the vortex of flame, Si-Chen issued one clear rule to Leo. During any battle, its primary focus must be survival above all else. With that instruction given, he stepped confidently through the fiery threshold. On the other side, they emerged onto a jagged cliff, overlooking a vast subterranean expanse. Molten rock flowing endlessly and towering pillars of liquid fire, illuminating the cavern with an infernal glow. Sweat dripped down Si-Chen's face as he adjusted to the searing heat, remarking under his breath how the temperature felt as though it could melt him alive within moments. Exploring cautiously, Leo peered over the edge of a molten chasm, its tiny body tense yet alert, scanning the fiery abyss below. Si-Chen admitted to himself that he had no clear expectation of what might appear next. Suddenly, a subtle disturbance near the lava caught the cub's attention, making it stiffen with sudden alertness. A blinding, scorching light erupted from the molten depths, flaring sharply, and filling the cavern with intense brilliance. Si-Chen's instincts ignited instantly, his eyes glowing red as he sensed an immense threat approaching, the kind that made the hair on his arms stand on end. Before he could even react, a devastatingly fast attack shot straight through his chest, striking with a force that defied comprehension. He jolted upright in his bed, gasping and clutching his chest, drenched in sweat, as the echoes of the attack lingered in his mind. Realization hit him. He had been killed instantly, before he even caught sight of his attacker, left stunned and bewildered by its nightmare-level power. Still trembling from the phantom sensation of death, he wondered aloud what kind of monster could possibly dwell on the second floor of the tower. His dread was cut short by a familiar voice. Si-Yun, calling from outside his door, announced that breakfast was ready. Sitting at the table, Si-Chen took in the sight of a lavish spread. Steaming bowls of ramen and an array of fresh, colorful fruit laid out before him. He glanced at Si-Yun, who was busy packing her bag, and commented that she had prepared far too much food for just the two of them. Munching on a piece of toast, Si-Yun instructed him to wash the dishes afterward and reminded him to hang the laundry later, her tone both casual and teasing. Watching her slip on her sneakers, Si-Chen asked where she was rushing off to on her summer break. She replied cheerfully that she was heading to a summer job. Concerned, he reminded her that he was managing their finances and insisted she didn't need to work. trying to keep her from overexerting herself. CC Yun smiled warmly, explaining that with his recent success, she refused to be left behind and wanted to contribute in her own way. She added that doing nothing all summer sounded unbearable, then waved cheerfully, reminding him again to complete his chores before heading out. Following her instructions, Si Chen set about washing the dishes and carefully hanging the wet laundry across the living room to dry. Once his chores were finished, he reflected on his sister's unchanging nature, how she had always been so reliable and spirited. His gaze fell on a framed photo of the two of them together, admiration washing over him for how strong and unflinching she remained through everything. Ironically, even though she wasn't yet an adult, he often felt she was the one looking after him, guiding and protecting him in subtle ways. His thoughts darkened as he considered the looming responsibilities ahead. Once his school affairs were settled, he would have to confront the Demon King Wrath, a battle that would take him away from CC Yun for a long, uncertain period. Still, recalling her warm smile, he admitted to himself that she was the one person he could never stop worrying about, no matter the distance or danger. Suddenly, a spark of inspiration struck him, and his eyes brightened with determination. Pressing his fingers to his temple, he pondered whether a certain experimental method might succeed. Soft pink glow filled his eyes as he focused and channeled his abilities, feeling the energy hum beneath his skin. In an instant, a portal materialized before him, and with a small tumble, Lion King Leo emerged safely into the room, landing gracefully on the floor. Si Chen froze, staring in disbelief at the little cub now standing in front of him. He was astounded by the realization that he could summon his contracted beast directly from the Dread Spire into the real world, bridging dimensions effortlessly. The energetic cub wasted no time, darting around the living room with boundless enthusiasm, gleefully tearing through stray tissues and making itself at home. Glancing at his system interface, Si Chen formulated a plan. He could now command Leo to watch over his sister during his absence, providing both protection and reassurance. Thanks to the passive abilities, if CC Yun ever found herself in danger, he could share the cub's vision and even teleport instantly to her side. Knowing how much CC Yun adored animals and recalling the joy she found in petting strays, Si Chen smiled. Presenting her with a little lion cub seemed like the perfect gift, both a companion and a guardian. Before Si Chen could enjoy the thought any further, a sudden violent crash exploded from the kitchen, instantly cutting through the quiet of the apartment. Startled by the noise, Si Chen turned toward the kitchen and hurried over to see what had just happened. He had been hoping CC Yun would be thrilled with her new pet, but the moment he saw the kitchen, all that confidence disappeared. Plates lay shattered across the floor. The whole room was in complete chaos, and Leo was already gnawing on the faucet like it was some kind of toy. Meanwhile, outside in the city, under the glow of sunset, a surge of dark energy suddenly ripped through a security camera mounted on a utility pole. The camera sparked, cracked, and went dead, leaving that entire stretch of the street without surveillance. Directly beneath the broken camera, a wounded man stumbled backward in terror. Blood ran down his body as he clutched an ice blade in his hand, retreating step by step from something he could barely face. He pleaded desperately with the unseen attacker, his voice trembling as a massive demonic claw began to take shape in front of him, its dark outline pressing down like a nightmare. In the next instant, the demonic claw lunged forward with brutal speed and drove straight through the man's chest, impaling him before he had any chance to escape. His eyes stretched wide in pure horror as glowing crimson tendrils wrapped around him and lifted his body off the ground, leaving him helpless in midair. A terrifying system interface appeared in front of him, cold and emotionless. On the display, a loading bar slowly filled, showing that the man was being devoured right there. Elsewhere, CC Yun was making her way home after a long shift at her summer job, walking slowly with bags in her hands and exhaustion written all over her face. She let out a heavy sigh of relief, feeling like her feet were completely worn out after surviving the busy summer rush at the bubble tea shop. Her usual route led her into a dim underpass where the light faded and the sound of the city seemed to grow distant around her. Without realizing it, CC Yun walked directly beneath the very security camera that had just been destroyed, passing through a blind spot where no one could watch what happened. As her footsteps echoed through the underpass, she suddenly sensed someone nearby. The strange presence made her stop in place. She turned around in surprise, and from the shadows came a cold voice announcing that she had finally arrived. Waiting in the darkness of the underpass was Jin Duoxin, holding a large bouquet of red roses in his arms. From the way he stood there, it was obvious he had been waiting for her for quite some time. He stepped directly into her path and offered the flowers as if everything had already been decided. Then he mentioned that she had left school too quickly to hear his invitation, before proudly adding that he had booked the entire top floor of Purple Peak Tower for the two of them tonight. CC Yun looked down at the roses, but instead of being moved, her expression turned cold. She asked him how he even knew where she lived. Jin Duoxin answered with smug pride, saying his father was the city hospital director, To him, finding a small detail like someone's address was apparently nothing difficult at all. CC Yun was completely unimpressed. She replied coldly that the two of them belonged to different worlds, then told him not to come looking for her again, before turning to walk away. Annoyed by her rejection, Jin Duoxin quickly moved after her and grabbed her arm, forcing her to stop. He complained about how much effort it had taken to reserve the venue, his anger rising as he demanded to know if she really planned to stand him up and humiliate him in front of his guests. CC Yun glared at him without backing down, making it clear that she did not care about his reputation. Then she called him out directly, saying it was creepy that he had followed her all the way home. The word creepy struck Jin Duoxin like a slap. His face twisted with anger as he stepped closer, losing the last bit of control he had been pretending to keep. With a dark, threatening expression, he warned her that she had no idea who she was talking to or what he was capable of doing. But before he could finish his threats, CC Yun reacted instantly. She snapped forward and slammed a hard headbutt straight into his face. The impact knocked Jin Duoxin crashing to the ground, where he cried out in pain and clutched his bleeding nose. Standing over him with anger burning in her eyes, CC Yun shouted that he should go get his head checked at his father's hospital. Still furious, she turned and walked away, warning him to stay far away from her. As she left, she grumbled that his pathetic stunt had completely ruined her day. Later that evening, outside her apartment building, warm light spilled from her family's window above, standing in sharp contrast to the dark alleyway below. When CC Yun finally arrived home, her exhaustion vanished almost instantly, as she was presented with the fluffy white lion cub, Leo. Her eyes lit up at once, sparkling with pure excitement and instant affection. She eagerly pulled the tiny beast into her arms and snuggled it close, completely falling in love on the spot. Barely able to contain herself, she excitedly asked her brother, Si Chen, where he had found such an adorable little creature. Si Chen introduced the cub as Leo and explained that it was a special gift just for her. Overjoyed, CC Yun could hardly believe it, marveling at the fact that she actually got to keep a baby lion. As Leo purred comfortably in her arms, CC Yun suddenly noticed something strange. She wondered aloud why such a tiny cub already had such a big mane, since normally only adult male lions were supposed to grow them. But she quickly brushed the mystery aside, far too happy to worry about it for long, and declared that she would get him registered first thing in the morning. Watching CC Yun and Leo bond so naturally, Si Chen finally felt a sense of relief settle over him. With the beast staying by her side, he knew his sister would have protection while he was away. Just then, a sharp chime from Si Chen's phone broke through his thoughts, and he lowered his gaze to the bright screen in his hand. As he read the email from the Guild Supervision Bureau, a satisfied smile slowly appeared on his face. The message confirmed that his application had been approved. Relieved by the news, Si Chen felt that everything could now move forward exactly according to plan. With his home life secured and the paperwork finally handled, Si Chen's confidence returned. Now, the next major hurdle waiting for him was the graduation tiebreaker duel against Gong Ting in 6 days. 6 days later, the tiebreaker exam officially began on the outskirts of the city, deep within Greenlight Forest. Director Gong Xuan stood before the candidates and told both of them to listen carefully as he began explaining the rules and details of the exam. At the base of a massive tree, a green portal shimmered behind him. Gong Xuan announced that the school had chosen this wild dungeon as the site of the tiebreaker, adding that the latest survey had rated it as a D-rank dungeon. He confirmed that both Si Chen and Gong Ting would enter at the same time and take the exam together inside that very same dungeon. Then Gong Xuan gave them a serious warning. Wild dungeons were unmapped and far more dangerous than the controlled school dungeons they were used to, so 3 senior guild members from Esternia would enter with them as examiners. Those examiners would accompany the candidates inside the dungeon, making sure they stayed alive while also judging their performance throughout the test. The examiner team consisted of Ivan from the Imperial Guild, Yasmin Kai from the Divine Eye Guild, and Sato Woda from the Silver Guild. Gong Xuan explained that the final scores would depend entirely on what those 3 examiners witnessed inside the dungeon. At the same time, a live video feed of the exam appeared in a dark VIP room back at the academy. Inside that room, Gong Lin watched the screen with a faint smirk. In silence, he hoped the 3 examiners would properly carry out their secret deal, leaving the job clean and making sure there were no loose ends. In the same room, Principal Yuan Long turned toward Vice Chairman Carl Cavendish and asked why he was still at the academy, especially when his official schedule had already ended 2 days ago. Carl lets out a low laugh as his eyes stay fixed on the screen, watching Si Chen and Gong Ting stand before the dungeon entrance. He replies that there is nothing happening right now more entertaining than this match. After all, it has been years since he last saw 2 genuine prodigies clash, so there is no way he would leave before witnessing it for himself. Director Gong Xuan raises his hand toward the glowing green portal and loudly announces the official start of the graduation tiebreaker exam. With both candidates burning with determination, the long-awaited match between Si Chen and Gong Ting finally begins. Neither of them hesitates for even a second. Si Chen and Gong Ting step forward together and walk straight into the bright green portal. Sai Chen emerges on the other side first, the portal's green energy still clinging to his body like drifting mist. He slowly scans his surroundings and finds himself in a gloomy, lifeless landscape. Dead trees stretch out around him, their twisted branches clawing upward through the darkness. Near the dungeon entrance, the examiners take in the unsettling atmosphere. Yasmin observes that the place looks like a flower-type dungeon, while beside her, Ivan casually offers Sato Woda a cigarette. Sato quickly shushes him, reminding him that they are on duty and that the camera drone is recording everything. Then, without warning, a sharp buzzing sound erupts inside Si Chen's mind, cutting through the heavy silence of the dungeon. Si Chen's eyes widen as a bright red hologram suddenly flashes out from his chest. The warning light flickers violently, bathing his face in an ominous crimson glow. A large system alert blazes in front of him, warning that an extremely dangerous creature is nearby. Si Chen is stunned, realizing this is the first time his demon heart has ever sent him such a serious warning. But almost as quickly as it appeared, the warning suddenly disappears. Si Chen is left staring into the dark forest, wondering if a high-ranking monster could really be hiding inside what was supposed to be only a D-rank dungeon. He and Gong Ting continue forward along a barren path, surrounded by enormous gnarled roots and crooked branches that twist together like a cage. Gong Ting takes the lead with steady confidence, moving through the foggy terrain without hesitation, while Si Chen follows closely behind him. From a high ridge above, Yasmin watches the candidates and comments on how suffocatingly thick the fog has become. Beside her, Sato Woda orders the examiner team to stay fully alert and keep their attention locked on the examinees. A sudden crack tears through the tense silence. Right in front of the students, the rocky ground splits open violently, sending broken earth flying upward. From beneath the shattered ground, a grotesque, massive insectoid monster bursts into view. The system identifies it as a poison cage ant, a D-rank flower archer. Gong Ting reacts without missing a beat. His katana flashes from its sheath as he charges straight toward the towering beast with aggressive speed. Seeing that instant response, Ivan praises the young man's reaction time. But Sato Woda quickly warns that monsters from wild dungeons are faster, crueler, and far more underhanded than the creatures used in ordinary school training. The poison cage ant opens the battle by firing a volley of glowing green toxic projectiles. Gong Ting moves smoothly through the attack, his blade flashing again and again as he deflects every shot. Then, with one clean and powerful motion, Gong Ting leaps high into the air and brings his katana down, slicing the monstrous insect completely in half. The ant's severed upper body crashes heavily onto the ground. At that moment, Gong Ting's blade erupts with fierce golden energy, and he thrusts it straight through the fallen creature. Drawing on the power of his nuclear warrior class, Gong Ting unleashes Blaze Blade Barrage. The attack detonates with overwhelming force, blasting the monster apart in a massive, fiery explosion. Watching from the ridge, Yasmin raises her wrist device and a glowing green 10 appears above it. She gives Gong Ting a perfect score for his field response, praising the way he reacted instantly and neutralized the monster's ranged attacks with almost no effort. Ivan also displays a perfect 10, approving of Gong Ting's combat logic. He points out that cutting off the venom-launching organ first stripped the beast of its ability to fight back. Sato Woda proudly raises his own score as well, awarding another 10 for finishing power because Gong Ting's final strike was clean, decisive, and completely without hesitation. As Gong Ting calmly stands with his glowing sword in hand, the examiners continue marveling at his precise positioning, control of the battlefield, and flawless execution. They agree that keeping such ice-cold composure against a wild monster is extraordinary for a student. Then Sato Woda shifts his attention to Si Chen, who is casually wandering off to the side with his hands tucked in his pockets. Sato immediately criticizes him, saying his complete lack of reaction when the monster appeared was unacceptable. To him, Si Chen's relaxed attitude looks like total disinterest and a complete failure in the exam. Gong Ting says nothing. He simply watches Si Chen's unusually relaxed back, staring at how calm and unbothered his rival seems to be. Back in the VIP observation room, Carl Cavendish and Principal Yuan Long are both watching Si Chen closely on the live screen. Carl asks in a casual tone what the principal thinks Si Chen is actually trying to do out there in the fog. Principal Yuan Long smiles faintly, as if he has already figured it out. He deduces that Si Chen is not wandering aimlessly at all, but actively hunting for something specific. Inside the dungeon, Si Chen suddenly stops near a tangled mass of giant tree roots and lightly taps his foot against them. After feeling out the structure beneath him, he realizes this central point could let him wipe out the entire threat in one sweeping move. Golden lightning sparks to life around his hand, crackling sharply as it condenses into a bright, jagged dagger. With his target finally located, Si Chen coldly declares that he has found it. Then he drives the lightning blade straight down into the massive roots without mercy. The instant the dagger strikes, a huge shockwave of golden lightning surges deep beneath the ground, tearing through the earth and violently rupturing everything below. A hidden nest of poison cage ants is blasted up from underground, caught completely inside the explosive electrical surge and obliterated by the violent burst of power. The examiners break into a sweat as they realize what Si Chen has done. He deliberately attacked the monster nest itself, and they start questioning whether he has lost his mind, terrified that provoking an entire horde of D-rank monsters could get everyone killed. Gong Ting watches the chaotic explosion unfold, and for the first time, his usual calm expression begins to crack. Shock flickers across his face as he wonders what Si Chen is planning next. Si Chen gathers momentum, channeling intense electricity into his boots until golden arcs burst around his feet, then launches himself upward with explosive force. Using the power of his lightning assassin class, he activates Flash God and rockets into the sky, transforming into a blinding streak of golden light. Moving at a speed almost impossible to follow, Si Chen intercepts the swarm of poison cage ants that had been thrown into the air by his own explosive trap. Then he unleashes a rapid, merciless storm of slashes, cutting through the airborne monsters one after another before they can even react. He darts between targets in mid-air, leaving a zigzagging web of golden lightning behind him. In just a few seconds, the entire cluster of beasts is shredded apart, and Si Chen descends gracefully back toward the ground. As Si Chen lands, the severed remains of the D-rank monsters begin raining down from the sky. Golden lightning slowly fades from his hands, as if the massacre had taken almost no effort at all. Up on the ridge, all three examiners are left completely dumbfounded. Sato Woda sweats heavily, struggling to process the unbelievable scene that just unfolded before them. Si Chen casually brushes green monster blood from his jacket, looking almost bored. Only then do the examiners remember that his official school report lists him as nothing more than an E-rank awakener, making it absurd that he just wiped out a huge swarm of D-rank monsters with such ease. Realizing there is no logical way to give such a flawless performance a low score, the compromised examiners grow visibly nervous and begin whispering frantically among themselves. Desperate to make their dirty arrangement work and find some way to sabotage Si Chen, they start scrambling for excuses that sound official on the surface. Maybe they could claim his movements were far too reckless, or twist his fighting style into some kind of rule violation. Anything that might let them unfairly drag down his score. Meanwhile, inside the VIP observation room, Carl suddenly bursts into loud, unrestrained laughter. His voice fills the room as he praises Principal Yuan Long, openly admitting that the principal had been right all along when he said Si Chen was still keeping his real strength hidden. Carl can hardly contain his excitement, saying that it is almost unbelievable to see such an explosive display of power when the exam has only just started. With his eyes fixed on the unfolding situation, he grows even more eager to see how Gong Ting will react when faced with a force this overwhelming. Behind him, Gong Lin says nothing at all. He simply stands there in complete silence, his face growing colder and darker by the second as his gaze remains locked on the monitors in front of him. Then, without warning, the live footage on the massive monitor begins to tear apart, swallowed by thick bursts of harsh digital static. The image flickers violently, distorting again and again until the entire screen suddenly goes black. In its place, a sharp red warning flashes across the display, announcing that the signal has been completely lost. Principal Yuan Long's expression tightens as he stares at the lifeless monitor. His brows draw together, and he questions aloud why the transmission would suddenly cut out again at a moment like this. Outside the dungeon entrance, the monitoring equipment begins screaming with rapid warning beeps. A technician hunches over his console, typing as fast as he can, while the system flashes a critical alert about a severe abnormality in the signal. On the diagnostic screen, the dungeon's official D-rank classification starts to distort violently. The clean rank display breaks apart in a storm of glitches before collapsing into a single unreadable question mark. At the very same moment, the internal communication signal plunges straight down, crashing all the way to absolute zero with no response left at all. The technician freezes in place, staring at the corrupted data on the screen with wide eyes, completely stunned by what he is seeing. Director Gongshuan breaks into a cold sweat as panic surges across his face. He snaps at the staff around him, demanding to know what kind of disaster could possibly be happening inside the dungeon. Panic reaches its peak when the swirling green energy of the portal suddenly begins to fade, breaking apart right before their eyes. In the next instant, the glowing threshold disappears completely. What remains is no longer a portal at all, only an ordinary empty cave entrance, leaving the candidates effectively sealed inside with no visible way out. Far deeper within the now isolated dungeon, a sinister and otherworldly melody begins drifting through the darkness. The sound does not simply echo through the gloom, it takes shape in the air as glowing pink and green musical notes float eerily around them. Si Chen stops moving at once. His body goes still as he listens closely, every bit of his attention drawn toward that strange, chilling tune. Almost immediately, he understands what is hiding beneath the melody. The presence woven into that sound is terrifyingly familiar. It is the voice of the Demon King, Wrath. Outside the dungeon at exactly 4 p.m., the cave entrance suddenly seals itself shut, shifting and hardening until it becomes a solid wall of rock. Director Gong Xuan is thrown into panic, demanding to know how the gateway could have vanished so suddenly. A technician quickly reports that all connections have been lost, adding that the equipment had thrown out a string of critical signal errors only moments earlier. Sweat runs down his face as anxiety overtakes him, and he immediately orders his staff to contact command without delay. His voice carries the weight of dread, because he can already sense that something catastrophic has unfolded inside the dungeon they can no longer reach. At the same time, inside the dungeon, that eerie melody continues to spread through the air, its sound taking physical form as glowing musical notes drift around them like unnatural fireflies. Si Chen and Gong Ting both pause, their attention pulled toward the bizarre sight surrounding them. For a moment, neither of them moves as the strange notes hover through the dim air. The examiners are just as baffled by the sudden change in atmosphere. Yasmin Kai looks around and asks if the others can hear that sound too, and Sato Woda confirms it, saying it truly does sound like some kind of strange music. As the heavy rhythm begins to thud through the dungeon, Si Chen's expression turns deeply alarmed. The sound is not just music to him, because he immediately recognizes it as the voice of the Demon King Wrath. His mind races in disbelief as he wonders why Wrath would be here, of all places inside a low-level dungeon. According to what he knows, the Demon King should not appear for another 3 years, and yet that terrifying presence is now unmistakably close. Then, all at once, the Demon Heart system begins hammering Si Chen with severe high-danger alerts, each warning striking across his senses like an emergency alarm. Si Chen's entire body tightens as he realizes the interface is not merely warning him. It is practically screaming that a lethal threat is closing in right now. Heavy thuds begin shaking the ground beneath his feet, one after another. Through the fog behind him, Si Chen suddenly understands that something enormous is standing there, hidden just beyond his sight. A sinister laugh rolls through the cavern, echoing from the mist like a voice from a nightmare. Then a towering shadow begins moving closer, its massive outline slowly taking shape through the thick fog. Sato Woda is visibly shaken by the crushing pressure of that presence. As he stares into the haze, he wonders what kind of monster could be hiding there. Just as two glowing eyes suddenly cut through the darkness, the creature finally steps forward and reveals its horrifying form. It is a grotesque humanoid mantis monster, its twisted body radiating dark energy as it looms over the rocky ground. Looking down at the group with a cruel glare, the monster welcomes the humans in a chilling voice. Then it declares that they have walked straight into its trap. Sato Woda is stunned the moment he hears the creature speak. A monster capable of forming words is no ordinary beast, and he immediately realizes that it must be at least a high-tier C-rank threat. His shock turns into frantic confusion as he questions how something this powerful could possibly exist inside a dungeon that was supposed to be only D-rank. Fearing that this high-level monster will tear the students apart, Sato instantly summons a massive glowing axe into his hands. Without hesitation, he throws himself forward, trying to intercept the beast before it can reach anyone else. As he charges in, Sato shouts for everyone to get behind him, urgently positioning himself as their shield against the monster. But before Sato can even bring his attack down, the mantis demon moves first, countering with terrifying speed that the eye can barely follow. In one brutal motion, the monster swings its scythe-like limb through the air. The strike lands cleanly, and Sato's entire arm is severed before he can react. The other examiners freeze in horror, unable to process what just happened. In that same instant, the mantis demon disappears from sight and reappears directly behind Gong Ting, raising its bloodied scythe. It mocks them coldly, telling the group to curl up and accept their fate. With a sickening, heavy impact, the monster drives its blades straight through Gong Ting's shoulder and out through his chest. Its voice turns ruthless as it commands the young man to die. Even with his body impaled, Gong Ting does not collapse. He grits his teeth against the unbearable pain, and instead of fear, a fierce, almost crazed grin spreads across his face. Taking advantage of how close the monster is, Gong Ting swings his flaming golden sword down with vicious force. The blade cleaves through the trapped scythe arm and chops it clean off, leaving the mantis demon staring wide-eyed in shock. Gong Ting does not give it even a second to recover. He immediately follows with a powerful kick in mid-air, sending the crippled beast flying backward across the rough, rocky terrain. Blood pours from the massive wound torn through Gong Ting's shoulder, but he acts as if the injury does not matter. His glowing eyes lock onto the enemy with a dangerous glare. He declares that since the Overlord was the one who drew first blood, the kill belongs to him according to the rule of combat priority. Then, with fierce intensity, he warns Si Chen not to even think about interfering in this fight. Si Chen keeps his focus fixed on the monster, watching every movement with sharp concentration. A green glow lights up in his eyes as he activates his abilities to measure the creature's true level of power. The system interface quickly updates the mantis demon's classification. The result confirms what they feared. This is not some ordinary dungeon monster, but a highly dangerous C-rank high-tier beast. Seeing the huge hole torn through Gong Ting's shoulder, Yasmin Kai urgently shouts for him to receive medical treatment. She pleads with him to suspend the exam and let them pull him out, warning that this monster is far beyond what he can handle. Gong Ting refuses without the slightest hesitation. He gathers intense fire magic into his hand, the heat surging around him as his stance hardens. No matter how badly he is injured, he completely rejects the idea of backing down or giving up. Si Chen watches in shock as Gong Ting presses his burning hand directly against his bleeding chest, using the raw heat of his own flames to painfully cauterize the severe wound. Pushing through the agonizing pain, Gong Ting fiercely declares that the fight does not end until one of them is dead. Without hesitation, Gong Ting leaps high into the air and brings his flaming sword down toward the crippled mantis demon to continue his assault. Meanwhile, outside the sealed dungeon, Silas Lin, the leader of the Imperial Guild's King Squad, assesses the vanished entrance. Calmly explains that this phenomenon indicates a highly intelligent monster operates inside, one that purposely lured the humans in before snapping the trap shut. Director Gongshin panics, desperately asking if there is any way to force the entrance back open since the students are still trapped inside. Silas coldly states that there is only one way to make the exit reappear. Someone on the inside must track down and kill the dungeon's overlord. Desperate for a silver lining, Director Gong Xuan tries to rationalize the situation. He suggests that, since a standard D-rank dungeon caps out at a C-rank overlord, the trapped examiners and students should still have a fighting chance to kill it and escape. Silas quickly shatters his optimism. He reveals that the initial D-rank reading is just a fabricated mask created by the overlord to purposely disguise the dungeon's true, deadly nature. Connecting the clues, Silas deduces that this specific dungeon is the culprit behind the recent string of Awakener disappearances his team has been investigating. He gravely informs a horrified Gong Xuan that the trap they stand in front of is actually an extraordinarily dangerous B-rank dungeon. Meanwhile, in the dungeon, the monstrous insect attacks relentlessly with its scythe-like arms. Gong Ting stands his ground, parrying the heavy blows with his flaming katana. He quickly retreats to evade a sweeping strike. As the beast raises its arm for a devastating blow, Gong Ting vaults into the air. The creature's attack misses its bladed limb buries deep into the ground and becomes firmly stuck. Seizing the opportunity, Gong Ting declares that he has the monster trapped. With a swift, powerful swing of his glowing sword, he severs the creature's head. The decapitated head tumbles across the rocky terrain as the rest of the group gathers. Yasmin watches in stunned disbelief, amazed that Gong Ting has managed to defeat the overlord entirely on his own. She admits that his strength is genuinely formidable. Nearby, Ivan channels a green healing aura into Sato Woda's injured arm, asking if he is recovering. Sweating, Sato expresses his gratitude for the timely intervention. However, Saito's relief vanishes as he checks his smartwatch. He alerts the others in a panic that his device has lost its signal, leaving them completely isolated. Yasmin and Ivan immediately check their own gear. Yasmin confirms her connection is gone, while Ivan grimly notes that every signal, including their compass positioning system, is completely dead. Sato panics, demanding to know when the camera drones went offline. Gong Ting looks back at him in confusion. Suddenly, the headless mantis monster stands back up. Without warning, the decapitated creature lunges straight at a shocked Gong Ting. Si Chen instantly intervenes, unleashing a flurry of golden lightning strikes that slice the creature into pieces. The system confirms the kill, awarding him experience points. Still reeling, Gong Ting demands to know how the monster kept moving after he cleanly chopped off its head. Si Chen calmly explains that the mantis was never the true overlord. It has been hypnotized the entire time, allowing its body to fight even after death. He urgently orders the examiners and Gong Ting to leave the dungeon immediately, warning that any of them could be the next target. Defensive Gong Ting questions how Si Chen could possibly know that. Sato angrily accuses Si Chen of losing his mind, insisting there can only be one C-rank overlord in the dungeon. He argues that the high-tier monster they just fought has to be the boss, as nothing else makes sense. Before Si Chen can argue further, his system floods his vision with critical warnings of a highly dangerous creature. Suddenly, a massive, pulsing wave of psychic energy sweeps through the cavern. Caught in the blast, Yasmin, Ivan, and Sato's eyes begin to glow with a sinister pink light as the true overlord's hypnosis takes complete control of their minds. Realizing his warning has come too late, Si Chen quickly activates a wireless earbud. He immediately recognizes the distinct pulsating sound wave. In his past life, he witnessed the Demon King, Raph, use this exact frequency to seamlessly hypnotize and slaughter millions of ordinary humans across the globe. He turns to see Yasmin, Ivan, and Sato, perfectly synchronized, marching forward in a mindless trance. Convinced that the dungeon's true overlord is directly connected to Wrath, Si Chen coldly resolves to face the creature head-on. As he follows the hypnotized examiners deeper into the dark cavern, Si Chen's system continuously bombards him with warnings about highly dangerous creatures ahead. The group soon arrives at a massive, eerie lair filled with glowing green egg sacs, where towering dark serpents guard a central cloth-draped figure. Si Chen remains completely unaffected by the monster's alpha frequency thanks to the counter-frequency audio track playing in his earbud, a precaution he prepared specifically for Wrath. However, knowing the unprotected examiners could drop dead from the mental strain at any second, he decides to kill the Overlord immediately. The sinister entity immediately senses them stepping into its domain. Its chilling voice rolls through the cavern, thick with hunger, as it savors the thought of tearing into their fresh flesh. Si Chen lifts his gaze and glares back with icy calm, his entire body ready for the fight about to erupt. Years earlier, in a brutal memory from the past, a young Gong Ting stands there exhausted and covered in blood. At his feet lies his brother, Gong Cheng, beaten down after Gong Ting had struck him again and again with a broken wooden stick. Their father, Gong Lin, watches the violent scene without the slightest trace of warmth. Instead of stopping it, he coldly congratulates 8-year-old Gong Ting for winning. Later, Gong Lin sits comfortably at an elegant dining table, surrounded by the luxury of the Gong family, as he calmly lays out the cruel rules his children are expected to live by. The one who wins earns the right to sit down and eat. The loser, young Gong Cheng, is denied even that much, and must kneel on the ground until sunrise. Outside, Gong Cheng kneels exactly as ordered, bruised from the beating and too frightened to resist. His small body stays bent obediently in the cold while his empty stomach growls from hunger. Unable to ignore his brother's suffering, Gong Ting secretly slips over to him in the dark and quietly offers him a piece of bread. Gong Cheng looks up in surprise, fear flashing across his face. In a trembling whisper, he warns Gong Ting that if their father catches him, the punishment will be terrible. But Gong Ting does not pull his hand back. Ignoring the danger completely, he firmly tells his brother to stop talking and just eat. That small act of kindness, however, does not stay hidden for long. Gong Ting is soon slapped viciously across the face, the blow snapping his head to the side. After that, he is forced down onto his knees, trembling on the floor as his father stands over him with a whip in hand. Looking down at his beaten son, Gong Lin asks in a cold voice whether Gong Ting understands why the Gong family has managed to hold so much power and status. Then he declares with absolute pride that the answer is simple. He has never once lost a fight. He forces that ruthless belief into his son's mind, telling him that winners are the ones who create the rules, while losers have no choice but to bow their heads and obey them. Even after being beaten, young Gong Ting still refuses to fully submit. With defiance burning in his eyes, he asks his father whether beating him would mean he gets to make the rules too. Gong Lin only laughs at the challenge, as if the thought itself is nothing more than a childish joke. Years pass, and Gong Ting once again ends up on the ground, badly beaten and barely able to hold himself up on his hands and knees. Blood spills from his mouth as his shattered sword clatters beside him. Filled with anger and humiliation, he demands to know why his father refused to face him in a proper, fair duel. He then pushes the question further, asking why Gong Lin had Silas Lin step in and attack him instead of accepting the challenge himself. Gong Lin remains completely unfazed with a faint smirk. He explains that his real strength is not limited to his own fists or weapons, but comes from the power and authority he can command through others. Standing above his defeated son, Gong Lin tells him that the world has never been governed by fair rules. In his eyes, the world runs on only one brutal truth. You have to win, no matter what it takes. He keeps driving that lesson into Gong Ting, insisting that the method is irrelevant and only the outcome matters. As a member of the Gong family, Gong Ting is expected to stand at number 1, even if he has to abandon family, loyalty, and his own dreams to get there. Gong Lin ends his lesson with a final merciless statement, saying that winning is the only reason Gong Ting is allowed to keep living. Those cruel words echo all the way back through Gong Ting's childhood, carving a scar deep into him until he comes to believe that survival itself depends on always winning. Back in the present, the group stands face to face with the enormous hidden monster Overlord, waiting deep inside the dungeon. All around it, giant snakes coil through the lair, while glowing green egg sacs pulse ominously like something inside them is ready to hatch. Si Chen remains completely unaffected by the creature's mind control magic. The special audio track playing through his earbud protects him, a countermeasure he had prepared because he always expected he would have to confront the Demon King Wrath sooner or later. But the hypnotized examiners have no such protection. Knowing their minds could collapse from the pressure at any moment, Si Chen decides the monster has to be killed immediately. Just before Si Chen can make his move, Gong Ting suddenly grabs his wrist. His grip is tense and desperate as he whispers for him to stop. To tear himself free from the monster's control, Gong Ting digs his fingers directly into the terrible wound in his own chest. Fresh blood spills down to the floor as the pain violently drags his mind back into focus. Breathing hard and shaking from the agony, Gong Ting admits that he has no idea how Si Chen managed to resist the trance. For him, the only way to stay conscious is to keep hurting himself enough to remain clear-headed. He urgently warns Si Chen not to attack recklessly, because one careless move will expose their position and could get every single person there killed. Sweat runs down his face as he points toward the countless glowing eggs clustered around the monster's throne. He explains that if they disturb the nest, those eggs will unleash dozens of C-rank monsters at once, and once that swarm surrounds them, survival will become nearly impossible. Looking over the trap laid out before them, Gong Ting understands what kind of enemy they are facing. This intelligent overlord disguised its lair as a weak dungeon on purpose, all to lure in unsuspecting awakeners and slaughter them. Because of that, Gong Ting is certain the monster will not simply ignore them. Sooner or later, it will come closer on its own. He quickly lays out a new plan. They should play along, stay still, and let the overlord believe its hypnosis is working. Then, the instant it comes within striking distance, they can launch a surprise attack together and kill it in one blow. Si Chen looks at Gong Ting with a hint of surprise, clearly a little impressed. He admits that he did not expect Gong Ting to stay this calm and think so logically under such intense pressure. Even so, Si Chen rejects the plan completely. His voice turns serious as he warns Gong Ting that waiting will not work, because this particular monster does not even need to move in order to kill them. He explains that the overlord does not have to attack with claws, fangs, or any physical strike at all. With a single thought, it can command anyone under its spell to take their own life. The moment those words leave his mouth, the hypnotized examiners begin moving as if to prove him right, each of them preparing to end their own life. Sato draws out a saw, Yasmin raises her gun and points the barrel at her own head, while Ivan's hands clamp around his throat as he starts choking himself. Si Chen acts before any of them can finish it. Moving with lightning speed, he strikes all three examiners in rapid succession, knocking them unconscious just in time to stop them from hurting themselves. That sudden burst of movement immediately draws the overlord's attention. Realizing that its prey is no longer quietly obeying, the monster grows furious and declares that its food has been ruined. In response to the threat, the overlord activates the glowing green egg sacs around the lair, and one after another they begin bursting open violently. Dozens of dangerous C-rank blade-arm mantises crawl out from the ruptured eggs, their bodies unfolding from the slime as the overlord commands the swarm to kill the intruders. As the deadly horde closes in from every direction, Gong Ting immediately realizes their stealth plan has completely fallen apart. With no time left, he decides they have to switch to an emergency backup plan. With his sword drawn, Gong Ting plants himself firmly in front of the unconscious examiners, putting his own body between them and the monsters closing in. Without taking his eyes off the danger ahead, he orders Si Chen to pick up the three adults and get out of the dungeon, promising that he'll stay behind and hold back the entire monster swarm on his own. Si Chen freezes for a moment, genuinely stunned that Gong Ting would make such a selfless decision and willingly throw away his own life just to give everyone else a chance to survive. Gong Ting doesn't pretend he can win. He admits he knows there is no way he can defeat a whole swarm of C-rank monsters by himself, but his voice stays firm as he says he can at least buy Si Chen enough time to escape with the others. As a mantis monster charges straight at him, Gong Ting swings his flaming sword into its attack, the blazing blade crashing against the creature's scythe, while he shouts that he'll take responsibility for this. He grits his teeth and blames himself, knowing that it was his demand for the tiebreaker duel that dragged everyone into this deadly trap in the first place. But the monster's raw physical strength is far beyond what Gong Ting can handle, and the force behind its strike overwhelms him instantly, sending him flying backward with ease. Gong Ting stabs his sword hard into the ground, using the blade to stop himself from sliding any farther, and while he pants for breath, he stubbornly insists that since all of this is his fault, he has to be the one who fixes it. Si Chen steps forward, his expression shifting as he admits that he had completely misjudged the kind of person Gong Ting really was. As his system begins switching his class, Si Chen reminds Gong Ting that he wasn't the only one who agreed to that duel, so the blame doesn't belong to Gong Ting alone. In the next instant, Si Chen fully transforms into his level 24 lightning assassin class, and a bright blade of golden electricity gathers in his hand, crackling with sharp, dangerous light. With mantis demons surrounding them, and the giant overlord's buzzing presence pressing down from ahead, Si Chen channels golden lightning through his body and calmly declares that he has a plan. Still bleeding badly from his wounds, Gong Ting immediately rejects the idea of standing their ground and fighting. He warns Si Chen that the overlord is operating on a completely different level from the rest of the swarm, guessing that the monster is at least B rank, and might even be a terrifying A rank threat. With urgency in his voice, Gong Ting tells Si Chen to grab the unconscious examiners and run, insisting that escaping is the only realistic option they have left. Si Chen admits that the monster is definitely a nightmare to deal with, but he points out the fatal flaw in Gong Ting's plan. The dungeon gates have already been locked down. If the exit were still open, the Imperial Guild's rescue teams would have rushed in long ago to save them. Gong Ting's eyes widen in complete shock as he realizes that they are not just surrounded by monsters, they are completely trapped inside. Si Chen keeps his gaze fixed on the silent overlord, studying its every movement while trying to figure out the safest way through this deadly situation. He reasons that if this creature really is an A-rank monster, then its combat power should be close to the phantom main Lion King he once fought inside the Dread Spire. Then, without warning, the swarm launches its attack. A mantis demon leaps forward with its heavy scythe raised, but Si Chen meets the strike head-on, easily blocking the force of the blow with his lightning dagger. At the same time, another mantis dives down from above, making Gong Ting's face tighten with panic as he shouts for Si Chen to look out. Before the creature can land its attack, Si Chen and Gong Ting move almost in perfect sync, their glowing blades flashing together as each of them cuts down an attacking mantis demon in an instant. But the brief opening doesn't last, because moments later, a massive swarm of mantis demons screeches violently and rushes straight toward them. Clutching his bleeding chest, Gong Ting clenches his teeth and realizes that with this many monsters charging at once, it is only a matter of time before the two of them are completely overwhelmed. Even with the odds stacked terribly against them, Si Chen refuses to back down and begins gathering his energy with sharp focus. Drawing power from his lightning assassin class, he forms several crackling blades of electricity in his hand, each one shining with fierce golden light. With one swift motion, Si Chen fires out a wave of golden lightning blades, and the attacks tear straight through several charging beasts at the same time. But he doesn't stop there. The moment the first wave lands, Si Chen immediately activates his Flash God skill. Moving so fast that his body nearly disappears from sight, he darts straight into the swarm and slices through multiple monsters in a single rush, sending their heads flying before they can react. Gong Ting watches the unbelievable display of power with his eyes wide, unable to accept that what he is seeing should even be possible. He knows that the assassin class is naturally weak in base strength, which should make it almost useless when surrounded by large groups of enemies. And yet, right in front of him, Si Chen slips past a massive scythe swing with perfect ease. Then Gong Ting notices something even more astonishing. Every single strike Si Chen makes lands cleanly on a weak point. That is when Gong Ting realizes Si Chen is covering the assassin class's lack of raw power with overwhelming speed, flawless technique, and terrifying precision. As he stares at the blurred afterimages flashing through the battlefield, Gong Ting is left amazed by just how fast Si Chen is moving. And while Si Chen tears through the rest of the swarm in a storm of lightning slashes, Gong Ting comes to a shocking conclusion. His rival's speed has already reached A-rank level, maybe even higher. Seeing Si Chen fight with such incredible skill lights a spark inside Gong Ting, and he tightens his grip around his glowing sword, realizing for the first time that they might actually survive this battle. But the Overlord, clearly irritated by their stubborn resistance, finally begins to move. It gathers a massive wave of dark pink energy around itself, the power swelling violently as it starts activating a powerful boost. That dark energy spreads across the remaining mantis demons, wrapping over their bodies and sharply increasing both their strength and their aura. Furious, the Overlord commands the newly powered-up swarm to tear Si Chen apart immediately and chop him into pieces. Si Chen stands his ground, electric blades burning brightly in his hands, as the strengthened enemies close in. One of the buffed mantises lunges forward, trying to crush him with its enhanced power. But Si Chen springs over the attack and slices the monster apart in midair. Seeing the battle grow even more intense, Gong Ting's fighting spirit surges, and he shouts for Si Chen to hold on as he raises his own blade and prepares to join in. Si Chen pushes himself to the edge, unleashing a relentless storm of golden slashes as he cuts into the supercharged swarm again and again. Then suddenly a mantis demon appears directly behind him. Trusting his insane speed, Si Chen vanishes from the spot just in time, slipping away before the deadly strike can connect. He reappears in an instant and launches a rapid barrage of close-range slashes. But this time his attacks fail to cut through the creature's newly strengthened armor. The enraged mantis immediately retaliates, swinging back with a heavy, brutal blow. Si Chen raises his blade and blocks the strike, but the sheer force behind it still drives him far backward, forcing him to give ground under the impact. Breathing hard after being forced back, Si Chen quickly understands what has changed. The Overlord's boost has raised every one of the monster's stats, pushing the entire swarm straight into B-rank territory. He narrows his eyes at their hardened bodies and notices that their shells are now as tough as solid iron, making it nearly impossible to pierce their weak points directly. If they want to land a real hit, they first need a way to shatter that armor. From behind him, Gong Ting suddenly calls out in gratitude, shouting that Si Chen has done enough and bought him exactly the time he needed. Without the slightest hesitation, Gong Ting throws away his speed, his stamina, and later that evening back at the rental apartment, Ju Tong finally arrives carrying bags of groceries in both hands, apologizing as she steps inside and says it took her longer than expected to buy the drinks. Si Yun sits there with Leo resting quietly on her shoulder and gently tells Ju Tong not to worry, since her brother still has not returned anyway. Hearing that, Ju Tong looks surprised and asks in disbelief if he is still outside. Ju Tong then asks whether Si Yun's brother already knows she passed the Art Academy exam. Si Yun says she has not told him the result yet, only that she had huge news to share, and since he is probably just running late, she suggests they start celebrating without waiting any longer. Just as they are about to begin, Cece Yun picks up an empty jar and suddenly realizes that the garlic sauce is completely gone. She tells Jutong to stay at the apartment for a little while, saying she and Leo will make a quick trip to the store. While she is out, she plans to grab some extra snacks too, so they can celebrate properly when she comes back. A short while later, Cece Yun finishes buying what she needs at a nearby convenience store and steps back out onto the street. As she walks home, Leo hides inside her backpack, happily nibbling away at his food while staying tucked out of sight. Cece Yun smiles softly at how well-behaved he has been, calling him her little angel for staying so quiet the entire time. She praises the cub in a warm voice, telling him he has been such a good boy, and promises that next time she will buy him cookies as a reward. But Cece Yun has no idea that from the shadows of a nearby alley, someone is already watching her every move. A man standing beside a hooded partner holds up a picture of Cece Yun, then speaks into his radio and reports that he has found their target. After confirming her identity, he asks whether they should attack right away. A voice crackles back through the radio, ordering him to wait and follow her until she moves beyond the range of the street cameras. The man quietly confirms the order and continues watching from the alley. Cece Yun continues walking home. The sound of heavy footsteps begins following close behind her. The stalkers carefully match her pace, step for step, slowly shortening the distance between themselves and her back. Cece Yun already knows they have been following her ever since she left the store, and as she keeps walking, she silently wonders what these men could possibly want from her. Hidden inside her backpack, Leo lets out a low warning growl. Cece Yun gently steadies him with her hand and quietly asks if he can sense the danger too. Keeping her voice low, she whispers for Leo to stay hidden inside the backpack and not reveal himself yet. Then she glances back toward the men following her, her expression turning sharp and fearless, and quietly says that her night has suddenly become a lot more interesting. Deep inside the dungeon, Si Chen breathes heavily as he realizes the monster boss's dark energy has transformed the bug swarm into a far greater threat than before. Seeing their shells hardened like solid iron, Si Chen understands that his blades can no longer cut through them so easily. Before he can strike their weak spots again, he needs a way to break through that armor first. At that moment, Gong Ting shouts out from behind him, thanking Sai Chen and telling him that the time he bought was exactly enough. Gong Ting gives up his speed and the rest of his remaining energy, converting everything he has left into raw strength as a towering pillar of flames bursts violently around him. With his strength pushed to its absolute limit, and his eyes glowing fiercely, Gong Ting raises his blazing sword and angrily announces his final move. He swings the flaming blade with everything he has, unleashing a massive wave of fire while declaring that no matter how strong the monster is, he will burn it down to ashes. The enormous fiery attack crashes straight into the charging swarm, swallowing the bug monsters in violent flames and burning through their ranks. The giant blade of fire tears through the group of enemies without stopping, pushing past the swarm and flying directly toward the calm boss waiting behind them. The strike slams into its target and detonates with a blinding explosion, engulfing the monster in a huge blast of roaring fire. Gong Ting can barely stay upright after using that attack, and his knees finally hit the ground as he leans heavily on his sword. He realizes that both his physical strength and his magic have been completely drained. Exhausted, Gong Ting wipes the sweat from his face and lets out a tired breath of relief. As the flames slowly fade and reveal the burned remains of the swarm, Gong Ting looks ahead with relief and happily says that the fight is finally over. But from within the dying flames, a sinister laugh suddenly rings out. The boss's mocking voice cuts through the smoke, asking if that pathetic attack was really all they could manage. Gong Ting freezes in complete shock, while Si Chen stays calm and quietly turns his gaze toward the place where the voice came from. As the smoke clears, the boss appears completely unharmed, standing inside a massive glowing green shield. It glares down at them coldly and calls their attack disappointing. Pure fear spreads across Gong Ting's face the moment he sees that the monster has not been damaged at all. All of his hope collapses at once, because he has just spent every last drop of power he had, and even then he failed to leave so much as a single scratch on the creature. Si Chen says nothing, his eyes fixed on the enemy's defense as he carefully studies the shield around the boss. He quickly realizes what happened. Right before the fire attack landed, the boss drained the life from the remaining monster eggs and used that energy to form a shield strong enough to block everything. Barely able to remain standing, Gong Ting pants heavily with his body trembling from exhaustion, completely defeated. He begins to wonder if this is really where they are going to die. Then Sai Chen steps past the broken Gong Ting and calmly offers him a deal. As he begins changing his combat class, Si Chen says he can let Gong Ting take first place in the exam, but only on one condition. Si Chen gets to keep the entire cash prize. He adds one strict rule to the deal. Gong Ting must never tell anyone a single word about what he is about to see. Si Chen calls forth his glowing sword, and in the next moment, his body fully shifts into his hidden demonic class. Gong Ting stares at him in total disbelief, stunned as he realizes that his rival has actually been hiding two different combat classes. Without warning, streams of glowing pink energy begin ripping themselves out of the dead bug bodies scattered across the battlefield. Si Chen activates a special skill that drains the leftover energy and strength from nearby corpses, pulling that power directly into himself. A massive pillar of pink energy erupts around Si Chen, surging upward as his power levels rapidly climb to a completely new height. Gong Ting throws an arm up across his face, barely shielding himself from the violent wind tearing through the cavern. Through the gaps between his fingers, he watches that unbelievable burst of power unfold before him, his eyes wide with pure, shaken disbelief. Even the boss monster goes still for a moment, its movements stopping cold as it silently fixes its gaze on the boy standing before it. Si Chen exhales through his sharp teeth, and a thick cloud of energy spills from his mouth like smoke. His body is already pushed to the edge, his strength and stamina both scraping against their absolute limit, but wrapped in that dark, demonic glow, he still stands with terrifying confidence and repeats the promise he made before. This monster will die by his own hands. Then the Overlord finally makes its next move, unleashing its skill, Soul Rest Enigma. A violent surge erupts from the Overlord's glowing green shield, spreading outward in an instant and filling the cavern with a crushing wave of psychic pressure. The mental attack crashes straight into Gong Ting. Already bleeding and completely drained, he clutches his head with both hands as pain twists across his face, cursing under his breath as that hateful hypnosis begins clawing its way back into his mind. But Si Chen, now fully transformed, doesn't even tremble under the pressure. The Overlord stiffens as Si Chen starts walking toward it, his massive sword resting calmly across his shoulder. Unable to hide its confusion, the monster demands to know why its hypnosis isn't working on him at all. Desperate to bring him down before he gets any closer, the Overlord fires off sonic hell, sending a brutal shockwave blasting outward through the cavern. The force tears across the stone chamber like a storm. Si Chen plants himself firmly and holds his ground without backing away, while Gong Ting is crushed under the pressure and bends over in pain, letting out a strained cry. The Overlord's gaze locks tightly onto the boy, watching him with growing unease. Si Chen simply stares back at it, his glowing eyes burning through the darkness. Then he takes another step forward, and then another, continuing straight toward the shielded monster without the slightest hesitation. Panic finally flashes through the Overlord. Its voice breaks into a stammer, unable to understand how its attack could have failed so completely. The Overlord roars out an order for its summons to rip Si Chen apart, and in response, a massive shadowy serpent lunges toward him with its jaws wide open. Si Chen tightens his grip around his glowing sword. Then, with one savage swing, he cleaves straight through the serpent and splits its head cleanly in two. The giant beast loses all strength and comes crashing down hard against the cavern floor. Before the dust can even settle, two more enormous serpents dive down from above, rushing at him from the darkness overhead. Si Chen braces his stance, draws his blade back, and sweeps it out in a wide, merciless arc. In a single cut, both serpents lose their heads at once. With nothing left blocking the way, Si Chen surges forward and charges directly toward the Overlord. The monster bursts into arrogant laughter, declaring that its barrier is impossible to break. Si Chen looks up at it and asks if that is really true. Then he launches himself high into the air, rising above the glowing shield as his attack takes shape. The system announces the activation of his stellar warrior skill, Ossuary Collapse. Power begins draining from the monster corpses scattered around the cavern, their remaining strength being pulled into Si Chen's body to fuel him. With that borrowed power surging through him, Si Chen lets out a fierce roar. He brings his sword down with every last bit of force he can gather, and the Overlord's barrier explodes apart, shattering into countless fragments. The Overlord can only stare, frozen in complete disbelief. Gong Ting is just as stunned. His rival had destroyed that shield with a single strike right before his eyes. Si Chen lets his weapon fall away, then pulls his fist back as blinding energy gathers around it. The system confirms that Triple Cataclysm has activated in crushing mode. In the next instant, Si Chen drives his fist straight through the Overlord's body, and a violent surge of raw energy blasts the monster apart from the inside. That devastating punch hammers the Overlord down into the ground with overwhelming force. Smoke rolls up from the crater. As it slowly clears, the Overlord is left as nothing more than a broken, shadowy remnant, muttering weakly while clinging to what little life it has left. Si Chen stands over the shattered monster and orders it to speak. His voice is cold as he demands to know what connection it has to Wrath. The Overlord is stunned by the question and asks how a mere human could possibly know Lord Wrath's name. Si Chen doesn't back down for even a second and demands an answer. The Overlord spits the words back at him, saying that if it actually knew where the Demon King was, it wouldn't be rotting away inside this dungeon. Instead, it would already be trying to break the seal that held him. Si Chen suddenly freezes. The meaning behind those words hits him hard. Someone in this world had actually managed to seal Wrath away. The Overlord breaks into wild laughter, warning that Lord Wrath will rise again. It swears that the Demon King will one day reclaim his armies, return to power, and slaughter every last human until nothing remains but bones. Then the Overlord's core ruptures, cracking apart before dissolving into the air. Si-Chan reaches out as the system activates, pulling in and devouring the monster's glowing green essence. The system confirms the absorption. Si-Chen gains a new Flower Mage class known as Phantom Sorcerer, along with the Overlord's psychic attacks and barrier abilities. His level rises all the way to 25, and he also receives 3 rare black scale snake galls as rewards. As Si-Chen reviews the details of his new class, the pieces begin falling into place. Wrath hadn't simply appeared out of nowhere in the future. The Demon King had already been trapped in their world long before the invasion ever began. That meant a massive hidden conflict must have happened in the past, one powerful enough to seal Wrath away, and Si-Chen realizes he knows absolutely nothing about it. His thoughts are suddenly interrupted when he notices Gong Ting limping toward him through the cavern. Badly injured and coughing up blood, Gong Ting admits that he never expected he would end up fighting someone with dual classes. He acknowledges that Si-Chen stands on a completely different level from him, and with no more excuses left, he admits Si-Chen is the winner of their duel. Gong Ting then gives his word that Si-Chen's secret will stay buried with him. Everything he witnessed today, he promises, will be taken with him to the grave. A moment later, the last of his strength finally leaves him. He coughs up another mouthful of blood and collapses back against the cavern wall. Si-Chen quickly tells him to hold on, refusing to let him slip away there. Now that the Overlord has finally been killed, the dungeon's sealed exit should open again at any moment, and once that happens, the guild's rescue teams will come rushing in from outside. But before Si-Chen can relax, his entire body suddenly goes still. His passive pact skill activates on its own, and a sharp warning floods straight into his mind. The system immediately forces a shared vision into his head, letting him see through the eyes of his contracted beast, Leo, and showing him exactly what the little cub is facing. In that vision, a hostile man stands there, wrapped in dark, swirling energy. The instant Si-Chen realizes where Leo is, his expression changes, and he shouts his sister's name in alarm. Through the psychic link, he sees an awakener with eerie green eyes glowing in the darkness, controlling shadowy tentacles that twist and spread around him. That man is closing in on the terrified Cici Yun, while she hugs Leo tightly against her chest, using her own body to shield the small cub from the creeping appendages reaching toward them. Late in the afternoon on June 24th, Si-Yun walks alone through the city's narrow back streets, making her way home as the sunlight begins to fade between the buildings. But from the moment she stepped out of the convenience store, something has felt wrong. A pair of creepy shadows has been following her every move, matching her pace no matter which street she turns into. Right behind her, 2 rough-looking thugs trail after her with smug grins on their faces, clearly not even trying that hard to hide their intentions. Inside her backpack, little Leo feels the danger before anything happens. The tiny cub lets out a low, protective growl, and when Si-Yun feels the bag shift against her back, she quietly asks him if he can sense those dangerous people too. But Si-Yun does not lose her cool. Instead, she gently grips the backpack to steady him, and softly tells her little partner to stay hidden inside, no matter what happens. Rather than shrinking in fear, Si-Yun glances back with a sharp, fearless look in her eyes. Honestly, a part of her is almost pleased they decided to follow her, because what looked like a dull evening has suddenly turned much more exciting. Her survival instincts kick in immediately. When someone is following you, the first rule is simple: get to a place full of people. Without wasting a second, she rushes down a flight of stairs and heads straight toward the crowded market district. At this hour, the restaurant street is overflowing with people, packed tight with hungry customers, busy workers, and crowds moving in every direction. Si-Yun uses the chaos of the dinner rush perfectly. She slips into the thick crowd like she belongs there, blending among shoppers and diners until the stalker's view of her starts breaking apart. Behind her, the 2 thugs begin falling behind fast. The man in the beanie gets irritated and starts shoving people out of his way, desperately trying to push through the crowded street before she disappears. But Si-Yun's escape game is way too sharp for them, and every step she takes makes it harder for them to keep track of her. The exact instant the crowd distracts them and their eyes drift away for even a split second, Si-Yun slips out of sight as if she vanished into thin air. The 2 thugs freeze in the middle of the street, completely stunned. Then panic hits them, and they spin around, scanning every face and corner for any trace of where she went. Meanwhile, Si-Yun has already darted away from the noise, cutting into a quiet, secluded alley where she can hide for a moment. She stops to catch her breath, then carefully looks back over her shoulder. Once she confirms the creepy stalkers are no longer behind her, relief finally washes over her face. But just as Si-Yun starts to believe she has shaken them off, a heavy footstep echoes from right in front of her. She freezes on the spot, startled to see a suspicious older man with slick-back white hair standing right on the steps of her own apartment building. The man casually smokes his cigarette like he owns the place, then mockingly complains that he has been waiting far too long because the building's front door was locked. Si-Yun's heart sinks as the truth hits her. This was never random, it was a coordinated trap. Horrified, she steps backward and demands to know who they are, and how they somehow knew exactly where she lived. Before she can get any answer from him, the two thugs from earlier finally catch up behind her, cutting off her escape route while laughing about how fast this little chick can run. With every path blocked, Sayun realizes she is completely surrounded. Still, she refuses to just stand there, so she makes a desperate dash down the corridor while the group of hunters bursts into cruel, manic laughter at her hopeless attempt. But these men are not ordinary street punks. They are awakeners. In the next instant, a blast of ice magic shoots across the ground and freezes Sayun's foot solid in place. Her body is still moving forward, but her foot cannot move at all. The sudden stop throws her off balance, sending her crashing face first onto the hard pavement as her backpack is knocked away from her. Her foot is trapped beneath a thick, shattered layer of ice, and above her, a glowing blue hand covered in frost reaches closer like a terrifying shadow. A disgusting thug in the beanie stands over her, his expression twisted and drooling like some deranged predator enjoying the sight of trapped prey. He mocks her, asking if she has already run out of energy, then tells her to take a little breather and entertain him for a while. As the creepy stalker reaches down, about to put his hands on her, Sayun screams in pure panic. But before his fingers can even touch her, a massive spectral paw slams straight into his face with terrifying force. The impact launches him backward through the air and sends him crashing brutally onto the pavement, shocking even the white-haired leader. Heavy thud shakes the ground as the thug's body hits the pavement, leaving the alley in a sudden, stunned silence. Standing protectively in front of the trembling Sayun is a colossal white lion, enormous, majestic, and glowing with an overwhelming presence. Sayun can only stare in shock, unable to process what has just appeared before her. As she looks up at the radiant, legendary beast, her eyes widen in complete disbelief. This terrifying predator is not a stranger at all. It is her tiny Leo. The beanie thug grabs his bleeding face with both hands, screaming in horror after being smashed by that unbelievable attack. He frantically yells at his partner, whining that the client who hired them never said anything about fighting a giant, ridiculously powerful monster lion. Leo opens his jaws and unleashes a deafening roar, so powerful it shakes the air and echoes through the entire alleyway. The hooded stalker is completely terrified, but desperation forces him to act. He panics and charges yellow lightning around his fists, trying to prepare one final defense against the enormous beast. For a baby cub like Leo, holding such a massive legendary form takes far too much strength. Right after that heroic entrance, Leo's energy runs dry. His giant body suddenly shrinks back down, turning into his tiny, adorable cub form before he tumbles onto his back, dizzy and completely drained. Seeing her fluffy little guardian pass out from exhaustion, Sayun panics. She immediately scoops her tiny champion into her arms, holding him close while frantically checking whether he is okay after using up all his strength. The white-haired leader watches the legendary lion shrink into a helpless, dizzy baby, and his expression turns deeply disappointed. With a cold scoff, he mutters that for a moment he actually thought the beast might be something impressive. Then, with a sharp snap of his fingers, he decides to end the game and finally reveals his own terrifying awakener ability. Massive wooden roots covered in sharp thorns violently tear through the concrete floor, spreading through the narrow alley as he sneers that the cub could not even keep its form for 10 seconds. The huge, twisting vines coil and writhe around Sayun, closing in from every side until she is trapped inside a living cage of thorn-covered branches. Sayun clutches the dazed Leo tightly against her chest, her body tense with fear, and desperately warns the man not to come any closer. But her warning means nothing to someone like him, a seasoned killer who has clearly heard fear in people's voices countless times before. The leader draws the thorny branches closer and closer to her face, the sharp tips hovering near her skin as he coldly tells her not to waste his time. He gives her a horrifying choice. She can hand the beast over willingly, or he will gladly rip it away from her dead body. Just as the leader is about to tighten his trap, Leo's eyes suddenly shine, and the legendary contract skill activates Stellar Warp. As Leo's mental control is consumed, a massive warp portal opens beside them. In a flash of pink light, Si-Chen teleports directly to Leo's location and drives a devastating kick straight into the leader's face. The force behind that teleport strike is overwhelming. The thug is sent flying backward like a rag doll, smashing brutally through the metal bins stacked in the alley. Si-Chen turned toward his sister with the same calm look on his face, as if he had not just arrived in the middle of total chaos. In a gentle voice, he apologized for making her wait, then casually explained that the dungeon business had dragged on longer than he expected. Only after that did his eyes move between her and Leo, asking if the two of them were still okay. At the same time, the hooded thug stood there in complete confusion, his mind nearly freezing from what he had just witnessed. He could not understand where this terrifyingly strong guy had suddenly come from, as if some overpowered monster had spawned out of nowhere and dropped straight into their ambush. His sister was still trembling from the shock, her face pale and her voice coming out in a rush as she tried to explain everything to him. She warned Si Chen that she had no idea how these people managed to track her down. And even worse, every one of them seemed to be a high-level awakener. But Si Chen simply looked back at her with a warm, steady smile, the kind that instantly made the fear around them feel a little less suffocating. He told her to breathe and calm herself down, because now that her big brother was here, she did not need to panic anymore. Meanwhile, from the broken rubble nearby, the enemy leader began to rise again. Realizing that his entire plan had been shattered in an instant, his expression twisted with rage. He snapped in frustration, furious that he had let his guard slip for even a single second, and that tiny mistake had allowed Si Chen to interfere. Thick, thorn-covered wooden roots curled around the leader's body, tightening like living armor as his anger exploded. He roared that Si Chen had just made the worst mistake of his life, then swore he would drag their severed heads back to his client and demand 3 times the original payment for the trouble. But Si Chen did not even blink in the face of that threat. He slowly clenched his fist, and in the next moment, golden lightning began snapping violently around his knuckles, lighting up the air with sharp, crackling flashes. Without taking his eyes off the enemy, Si Chen calmly told his sister to get behind him and stay there, promising her that this fight would be over very quickly. Si Chen's mind drifts back to the days when he was still just a helpless kid. In a narrow, dust-filled alleyway, his small body is being viciously beaten into the ground while dirt and gravel scrape against his skin from every direction. Leading the entire beating is his orange-haired cousin, the same arrogant punk barking at him non-stop while demanding that Si Chen finally understand his place in the family hierarchy. A few street thugs pin young Si Chen flat against the filthy pavement, locking down his arms and shoulders as they try to crush not only his body, but his pride along with it. But there's one thing those idiots never prepared for. They forgot Si Chen had a sister willing to fight for him no matter what. Out of nowhere, young Si Yun storms straight into the alley, gripping a huge metal pipe with both hands. Her face is filled with panic and rage as she screams at the gang to get their filthy hands off her brother immediately. The orange-haired cousin doesn't feel threatened in the slightest. He throws his head back and laughs mockingly, completely amused that such a tiny girl actually thinks she can play the hero here. The moment Si Chen notices the gang turning their attention towards Si Yun instead, terror instantly floods his face. Struggling wildly against the people restraining him, he screams at his cousin not to even think about taking another step toward her. Desperate and panicked, Si Chen reminds him of the promise he made before, the one where he swore he would never lay a single hand on Si Yun, no matter what happened. But the smug cousin only bursts out laughing harder. Without even a shred of guilt, he openly admits that the whole promise was nothing more than a lie from the start. With a vicious grin spreading across his face, he proudly declares that today he's finally going to beat some obedience and humility into this annoying branch of the family once and for all. While the ringleader keeps rambling and showing off, he completely lowers his guard without realizing it, and that careless mistake costs him dearly. Seizing the brief opening, young Si Chen suddenly spots a heavy brick lying beside him on the ground. In one violent motion, he snatches it up and smashes it straight into the face of the thug holding him down, instantly shocking everyone in the alley. At that moment, young Si Chen is absolutely consumed by fury. Every ounce of fear inside him is replaced by pure rage. Clutching the blood-stained brick tightly in his hand, he charges directly toward his orange-haired cousin without the slightest hesitation. The arrogant ringleader's expression changes instantly. His face turns pale the second he sees Si Chen sprinting at him, with eyes filled with terrifying murderous intent. Without slowing down at all, Si Chen swings the brick straight into his cousin's face for breaking his promise. The impact sends the guy crashing violently onto the hard concrete pavement. Now bleeding heavily and sobbing on the ground, the defeated cousin completely loses his composure. Trembling in fear, he screams that Si Chen is a total psychopath. Breathing heavily after the outburst, young Si Chen slowly lets the brick fall from his hand. Then he turns toward the trembling Si Yun and gently reassures her that everything's all right now, and she doesn't need to be scared anymore. Back in the present, Si Chen calmly tells Si Yun to stay hidden somewhere safe and keep herself out of danger. With complete confidence, he assures her that this whole mess will be over in no time. The stalkers refuse to let their target escape so easily. All 3 of them rush towards Si Chen at once, fully intending to cut him down on the spot. Holding little Leo tightly in her arms, Si Yun instantly panics. She hurriedly warns her brother that these aren't normal people but 3 extremely dangerous awakeners, and she genuinely cannot imagine how he could possibly fight all of them at the same time. The hooded thug charges forward first, pulling back a fist crackling violently with lightning energy as electricity flashes around his arm. Rushing straight at Si Chen, the thug loudly mocks him for just standing there motionless instead of trying to defend himself. But before he can even process what's happening, Si Chen counters with one devastating punch. The blow lands so hard that the hooded thug gets blasted headfirst into the concrete wall behind him. Watching her brother effortlessly crush a high-level awakener with a single hand, Si Yun's eyes widen in complete disbelief while her jaw practically drops to the floor. Right afterward, the bleeding thug in the beanie suddenly leaps forward, desperately thrusting his glowing elemental dagger toward Si Chen in midair. Si Chen doesn't even look remotely pressured. Without breaking a sweat, he catches the thug's wrist cleanly in the air before driving a brutal knee strike directly into the guy's face. The impact carries horrifying force behind it. The beanie thug gets launched backward like trash, flying straight into the alleyway garbage bins before collapsing in a twisted heap. Suddenly, a gigantic thorn-covered root bursts through the alley at terrifying speed, aiming directly for Si Chen. But with absurd reaction speed, he casually tilts his head aside and avoids the ambush by mere inches. The heavy vine completely misses its target, and instead smashes violently into the tiled brick wall behind him, leaving cracks spreading across the surface. Seeing both of his subordinates get taken down so easily, the white-haired leader completely snaps. Furious beyond belief, he screams that some brat wearing a school uniform is humiliating their entire group. Furiously channeling his plant-based powers, the boss summons a storm of enormous glowing wooden spikes around the alley. Grinding his teeth in rage, he swears he'll turn Si Chen into a human pincushion. Even facing that overwhelming barrage, Si Chen remains unbelievably calm. Using his monstrous agility, he slips and weaves through the razor-sharp vines with flawless movements, avoiding every single attack without receiving even one scratch. Then, in one smooth motion, Si Chen instantly bursts through a gap in the defenses and closes the distance before anyone can react. The white-haired boss is horrified. His eyes nearly pop out of his skull as he screams that this shouldn't even be possible, unable to comprehend how anyone could move that fast. Watching her brother completely dominate the fight, Si Yun suddenly remembers something important. He didn't barely pass his graduation combat exam at all. He had utterly crushed everyone who stood against him. Si Chen pulls back his fist and drives a crushing punch straight into the leader's jaw, making it painfully obvious that the difference between them is on an entirely different level. The terrifying impact sends the white-haired boss flying backward like a missile before he slams brutally into the alley wall with a sickening crash. And just like that, the white-haired leader collapses unconscious onto the pavement, bleeding heavily and completely defeated. Over by the garbage bins, the beanie thug still hasn't moved an inch, remaining completely knocked out cold. Meanwhile, the hooded thug hangs slumped against the wall, completely unconscious as well. In less than a minute, the entire threat has been utterly wiped out. After casually brushing the dust off his clothes, Si Chen turns toward his sister and calmly tells her to take little Leo home where it's safe. Smiling reassuringly, he promises her that he'll dump these clowns at the local guard station first and return to the apartment before she even has time to worry. Still slightly dizzy from witnessing such an unbelievable fight, but feeling completely protected, Si Yun hugs her fluffy little cub tightly and happily agrees to head home ahead of him. Several hours later, beneath the faint glow of a crescent moon hanging over the city, the severely beaten white-haired leader slowly begins regaining consciousness. Groaning painfully, the battered boss struggles to pry open his blood-covered eyes while every part of his body screams in agony. The moment he finally understands his surroundings, confusion immediately turns into terror. He discovers that he and his two thugs have been stripped of all their weapons and tied tightly back-to-back around a concrete pillar, while Si Chen quietly stands nearby staring directly at them. The leader instantly panics and hysterically demands to know where they are and why they were dragged out to this isolated place. Beside him, the beanie thug whimpers miserably, complaining that his cracked skull feels like it's splitting apart. Completely unmoved by their whining, Si Chen coldly asks whether they work for the Black Mountain Society. Since groups like theirs never do anything without payment, he directly demands to know who hired them to kidnap his sister in the first place. The battered boss simply lets out a bloody chuckle instead of answering. Even in his miserable state, he arrogantly explains that betraying clients is basically a death sentence in their business, so there's no chance he plans on opening his mouth. Si Chen doesn't even blink after hearing the thug refuse to talk. Looking down at the tied-up mercenaries struggling around the concrete pillar, he lets out a calm sigh and realizes they're determined to act tough until the very end. Since they want to make things difficult, he decides they can handle this the hard way instead. Without warning, a dark, swirling aura suddenly erupts around Si Chen's body. Thick streams of sinister energy spiral through the air as the system begins initiating a terrifying class switch right in front of the panicking thugs. A moment later, the system confirms the transformation is complete, revealing Si Chen's frightening level 25 Phantom Sorcerer class. The atmosphere around him instantly grows colder and heavier, making the bound mercenaries feel an overwhelming pressure crawl down their spines. Now armed with horrifying psychic abilities like Soul Rest, Enigma, and Ripple Hell, Si Chen slowly stares down at the terrified men before him. The mercenaries quickly realize this interrogation is about to become far worse than simple violence, because he's preparing to drag their minds through a nightmare they'll never forget for the rest of their lives.